Xianxia holds a bronze mirror that once belonged to a woman who never existed, and his tears are the only proof she was ever real. The Abyss of Nothingness is whispering secrets about the energy of extinction, and the bonds he thought were eternal are starting to crack. Leave a like and subscribe before the next truth shatters everything. The Abyss, the two words immediately reminded him of the most mysterious and terrifying phenomenon in the world, the Abyss of Nothingness. As if sensing Xianxia's thoughts, the voice answered, "It is what is commonly known today as the Abyss of Nothingness." "The Abyss of Nothingness will return everything to nothingness one day," Xianxia muttered. "And the power that does it is the energy of extinction." "You are more or less correct," she answered. "In the beginning, the energy of existence and energy of extinction both existed in the same universe. Naturally, the ancestral god was unable to eliminate herself or create new life. One of the biggest modifications the ancestral god did to the primal chaos was to separate the energy of existence and energy of extinction into two distinct bodies and isolate them completely. That is how primal chaos became split into two worlds, the current universe and the abyss. The god realm of beginning exists not to connect the two worlds together, but to act as a barrier that pushes them even further apart. After the ancestral god had disappeared, life populated the world of existence, but nothing was born in the world of extinction. In the memories the ancestral god left behind to her descendants, it was mentioned that the world of extinction and the energy of extinction lies behind the abyss, and that not even true gods or devils are able to survive it. Anyone or anything that falls into the abyss will be annihilated completely. A pause later, the voice sighed. Was her decision to separate extinction and existence the right one? Had she succeeded in building a new balance for the primal chaos, or had she simply torn down its natural balance, the best state it should have been? That wasn't something the ancestral god herself could say at the time. Looking at the development and prosperity of the current world, though, it wasn't a bad decision at the very least. "Continue," Xianxia tried to urge the voice to get on with it. His heart was burning with the desire to know what all this had to do with Xia Qingyu. Also, as muddle-headed as he was right now, he had come to realize that the voice speaking to him in his soul sea was none other than the existing will of the ancestral god herself. Everything she told him thus far was something only the ancestral god herself would know. He never imagined that he would one day interact with the one existence that was loftier than even the devil emperors and the creation gods, the true highest existence in the entire primal chaos. The reason he could interact with her was it because he cultivated the world-defying heaven manual, the ancestral divine art she left behind. Space will crumble, power will fade, life will fade, and light will dim. There is no such thing as true permanence in this world. All things, even the powers and laws left behind by the ancestral god herself, will fade away one day. The baptism of time and the negative impacts of the great war between gods and devils. The laws bestowed upon the abyss break down very quickly the moment the first flaw appears, and the ancestral gods will quickly found that out firsthand. When she attempted to check the abyss, she discovered in surprise that the abyss had somehow detached itself from her laws. Not even her will was able to enter the abyss anymore. Normally, the ancestral god would never interfere with the happenings of the universe. Everything that happened was the choice of the era, and she is but an indifferent observer to it all. It wasn't like she could interfere anyway. She had eliminated her own existence and left only her will behind after all. However, the abyss is an entirely different story, especially since it has broken free of her laws. She was the creator of the abyss, so she knew better than anyone what it contained. If the energy of extinction within it were to spiral out of control and spill into the world of existence, anything and everything would be destroyed. "Xianxia?" The voice's claim stunned him, but he wasn't really too worried. Records dating back to the era of the gods were obviously limited, but as far as he knew, no one had ever found anything abnormal regarding the Abyss of Nothingness since as the latter stages of the Great War between the gods and the devils until now. Moreover, all records regarding the Abyss of Nothingness basically described the same thing, that it was an impossibly empty, silent pit that seemed almost frozen in time unless someone were to throw something into it, at which point it would transform into a ruthless maw that devours everything. The ancestral god thought long and hard after detecting that the abyss had come free from the laws she had bestowed upon it. In the end, she arrived at a decision. She decided to rebirth herself into the primal chaos. Xianxia was stunned yet again. The primal chaos was no longer hers, so she wouldn't have an infinite amount of ancestral origin power to call upon even if her rebirth was a success. That said, she would have enough power to restore the laws on the abyss and restrict it once more. This was the only way to avert that worst outcome. The ancestral god has developed a deep love for all that is living, and she couldn't bear to see it return to the lifeless state it was in, back at the beginning of the primal chaos. Even though the very creatures she was trying to protect were conducting an extinction event of their own at that moment. Rebirth of the ancestral god. Xianxia muttered the 5 words that would shock even an ancient true god to speechlessness. Has she succeeded then? The rebirth of the ancestral god cannot be easy, of course. Both reforging her essence and restoring her ancestral sacred body required an incredible amount of energy of the primordial universe, and 1,000 reincarnations. 1,000 reincarnations. It was yet another set of words that absolutely exceeded anyone's imagination. Unbeknownst to everyone, the ancestral god's rebirth began before the war of the gods and devils had even ended, and whilst the energies of the primal chaos were still flowing into the abyss. On her first cycle, she was born to the god race. She gradually awakened as a true god as she grew older, and she should have led a long life if she wasn't born in the middle of a most terrible war. She died when she was just 6,000 years old. On her second cycle, she was born to the devil race. She only lived 4,000 years for the same reason. On her third cycle, she was born a princess of the sea race, but she still suffered a similar fate despite belonging to neither the god race nor the devil race. She perished in one of the skirmishes between the gods and the devils. On her fourth cycle, she was born an illusory spirit many-colored finch. She saw the world in a completely different manner through a completely different set of eyes, however. She still perished in the war between the gods and devils, and her own race became fully extinct. Xianxia couldn't truly imagine how powerful the true gods and true devils were, but he could definitely imagine what a tragedy it was to be stuck in a war that had gone completely out of control as a mortal. Every life where she died in accordance to fates is considered to be a complete cycle. Sometimes she was a man, sometimes she was a dragon, sometimes she was a phoenix, an eagle, a butterfly, an insect, grass, a tree, a flower. No matter what she became in her next life, she always inherited the ancestral god's full memories and will. She witnessed and experienced everything with perfect self-awareness. Later on, the cornered devil race unsealed the evil infant, caused the myriad tribulations, and finally ended their great war in mutual destruction. When there were no more gods or devils in this universe, the mortals who survived traveled to their realms in search of their inheritances and kickstarted a new, godless era. That is the era that you know today. Meanwhile, the ancestral god was still continuing her 1,000 cycles of reincarnation. At this point, the energies of the primal chaos were still draining away into the abyss, but the speed at which they were drained was also growing slower and slower. It looked like it was simply a matter of time before it came to a complete stop. Generations come and go much more quickly in this godless era, and countless events occurred in just the short span of 1,000,000 years. The average lifespan of a living being has also shortened tremendously, though this was a great boon to the ancestral god. It meant that she would be completing her cycles much faster than she had initially anticipated. 10 cycles, 100 cycles, 600 cycles, 900 cycles. Finally, she completed her 999th cycle, and it had taken her less than 10% of her predicted time to reach it. The shorter it took for her to be reborn to this world, the lower the chance the abyss would go out of control before she was ready. This was without a doubt the best possible outcome. The ancestral god began her last but most important cycle of them all. If she is able to complete this cycle, her ancestral divine powers and her ancestral sacred body will be fully reborn. Moreover, she has borrowed a bit of the current universe's aura to be reborn in this world, meaning that her new self will be nothing like the ancestral god she used to be. She will become an independent existence who is friendly to the primal chaos and will not distort the existing rules and laws in any way. Moreover, her final cycle of life must be a true, complete cycle. Unlike her previous 999 cycles, she will not be inheriting the ancestral god's will or memories. She will begin as a whole new individual with her own independent will. As for her ancestral will and memories, they will be sealed within her ancestral soul. They will only awaken when she has reached the end of her lifetime. Xianxia listened in silence, but the shock in his heart was comparable to that of a sea storm. If the ancestral god completes her final cycle of life, she will become reborn in this world. Until that happens, the ancestral will was supposed to be dormant. However, Yun-Chi had no doubt that the voice speaking to him was the ancestral will herself. Did this mean that the ancestral god had completed her final cycle of reincarnation already? Was the reborn ancestral god existing in this universe right now? On her 1000th cycle, the ancestral god was born to a small, average city of a lower realm planet. Her mother passed away in depression not long after she was born, so her father had to raise her alone. She had plenty of relatives, but they all looked at her with indifference when she had her back turned toward them. Her childhood wasn't bleak in the slightest, however. Her father loved her dearly, and she grew up with a childhood friend. He was her nephew, though he was actually a year older than her. Yun-Chi's soul abruptly tensed. Wait a second. Living together allowed their relationship to develop to the point where they were practically inseparable. However, when they neared the age of cultivation, it was discovered that her nephew had broken profound veins. He became a cripple whom everyone took pity or looked down upon. This time, every string in Yun-Chi's soul was trembling like a leaf. When they were younger, her nephew wouldn't allow her to suffer even the tiniest of grievances. If anyone dared to touch even a hair on her person, he would flail his frail arms and fight them with death in his eyes. At the time, he possessed the brightest eyes in the entire world. The voice's tone grew gentler without knowing. However, his eyes were never the same after he learned that he was a cripple. That was why she began cultivating even though she wasn't of the right age yet. He had protected her when she was younger, so it was her turn to protect him for the rest of his life. That was what she had sworn to herself. In the norm, she also grew attached to him to the point where she would grow anxious and began searching for him when he left her sight for even a short moment. Deep love wasn't the only reason she wanted to protect him. She had also become so dependent on him that she couldn't imagine living without him. Time passed, and they reached adolescence. However, they remained as inseparable as ever. He was 16 years old and she 15 that year. It was the day of his wedding. Wait! Yun-Chi couldn't maintain his cool any longer. His soul was shaking, and his mind felt as befuddled as it was lost. The ancestral god's last cycle, she is. She realized that he was speaking with the ancestral god herself. He had been treating her like the highest being in the entire universe, which she was. He hadn't dared to release the spiritual pressure that he naturally imposed upon others in the norm, nor had he dared to interrupt her too many times. He might be the unparalleled great emperor of the primal chaos, but he was smaller than an ant compared to the ancestral god. The world existed because the ancestral god created it. The reason she went through 1,000 reincarnations to come back to life was to eliminate a hidden threat to the primal chaos as well. Both her existence and her purpose deserved his greatest respect. However, when the ancestral god began talking about her final cycle of life, every sentence she spoke had invoked a sense of déjà vu. The more she spoke, the stronger the feeling became until finally, when the name, Xia Yuanba, resounded clearly inside his soul sea, the calm he just barely mustered was completely washed away into nothingness. He was so shocked that his soul sea world grew turbulent in response to his emotions. Xia Ling Zai, it was the single most familiar name in his life. Ling Zai my Lingxi, she's the ancestral god's reincarnation. No, she, the ancestral god. He might never feel this much shock again in his life. His soul sea had transformed into a storm made of towering sea waves and innumerable giant vortices. He felt like his consciousness was spun round and round in one of these vortices until he lost all ability to think completely. He had grown up together with Xia Yuanba. There was no one who knew her better or was closer to her than him. She was sweet-tempered to the point of being weak, but that was only in regards to matters that didn't involve him. Otherwise, she could be tough, bold, and even outright reckless at times. At the very least, no one would connect her with the word mighty. Her profound talent was extremely mediocre. She cultivated hard to protect him when they were younger, but she quickly lost the motivation to continue after his profound veins regrew, and he reached a point where he no longer needed her protection. She had never had any interest in cultivating after all. She would rather be a normal girl in a small city who, besides taking care of her father, Yangan and Yangning in the norm, quietly looked forward to his next return home. Many times she had compared herself to Yun-Chi's harem of women and believed herself wanting. In reality, though, Yun-Chi could exaggerate his wildest delusion 1,000 times over, and he still could never imagine that his childhood friend, Xianxia was the reincarnating ancestral god herself. The one god who created the creation gods, the devil emperors, and even the primal chaos itself. It was at this moment that an extraordinarily gentle soul energy wrapped around his person. It gradually quelled his soul sea and returned clarity to his mind. "This is probably quite the difficult surprise for you to swallow," the voice said in a mild tone. "You were her childhood friend, and now her official husband after you completed a wedding with her." Yuan-Chi still couldn't form a coherent sentence. As his mind became clear once more, he began to recall all the inexplicable happenings around Xianxia. She could read the world-defying heaven manual, a text that was written in the language created by the ancestral god herself, the divine text of absolute beginning. The world-defying heaven manual itself was the ancestral divine art left behind by the ancestral god. The reason he could never truly consummate his marriage with her, was it because the level of their existences were so far apart that a union was simply impossible? Or because the ancestral god set up some sort of restriction that prevented anyone from contaminating her during her final cycle? Xianxia, the ancestral god, Yuan-Chi was already trying his best, but he still couldn't truly reconcile the true names. Suddenly he noticed something and asked that question that had fully formed in his mind a while ago. "You are the ancestral will of the ancestral god, right?" "That is correct," the woman's voice replied. "You said that the ancestral will and memories will fall aslumber during the ancestral god's final reincarnation." Yuan-Chi forced his soul to calm down before continuing. "So why are you awake right now? Xia is still present, so her cycle is still ongoing. Shouldn't you be asleep right now? Why are you—" His words suddenly caught in his throat. Despite being inside the soul world, he could clearly hear his heart's wild beating. He had a faint idea what the voice was going to say next. "It's because this last cycle has already ended in failure. Even the near-complete ancestral sacred body has been greatly undone. The reason for that," she said quietly and gently, "you have already guessed the answer." "Was it because of me?" Yuan-Chi murmured. Not only did she fail her last cycle, her ancestral sacred body was greatly undone. "It all happened on the day you were getting married. On that day, she woke you up very early in the morning, dressed you in the wedding clothes she had sewn herself, and watched you drink the morning porridge she had cooked herself." Before he knew it, when the woman's voice grew so soft and distant that he couldn't hear her anymore. Then a new scene had unfolded inside his soul sea. "Little Chi, wake up, you need to get out of bed now." "It's still so early, just let me sleep in a little longer." "Little Chi, wake up. Today's the day you're getting married to Miss Situ, and it's almost time already. Quickly." "Little Chi, I made this porridge for you. You have a weak constitution, and it's going to be a long morning, so you should finish everything." "Phew, I'm done. I wonder if I can still eat your meals after I get married, little aunt." Don't forget that the governor's daughter is marrying into your family, not the other way around. If you want, I can prepare your meals every day just like before." "Of course not. Didn't I promise you yesterday that I'd never forget about you even after I marry Siduk Xuan? We'll spend just as much time with each other as we used to, and I'll always be there whenever you call for me." "Good boy. Still, you've really become a big boy, haven't you, little Chi?" Big brother, I'm here. Wow, your wedding clothes are pretty impressive, so how does it feel to get married? Why do I feel like you're not very excited?" "To be honest, I am not excited. It was something my parents decided before I was born, and I've only met Siduk Xuan a couple of times. I don't even quite remember how she looks, which is why I barely care about the wedding at all. You, on the other hand, are unusually excited given the time of the day. It's not just because of my wedding, is it?" I do have some good news to share. The day before yesterday, my father invited a friend of his, a teacher from New Moon Profound Palace, over to his house. He was hoping to ask for a favor and drop me into New Moon Profound Palace. But after his friend saw me, he said that someone of my talent should just join Blue Wind Profound Palace directly. "Oh, that's amazing. That's something the entire floating cloud city should celebrate." Heh. I was so excited I haven't slept for the past 2 days. When I join Blue Wind Profound Palace and become even stronger than before, I'm sure no one will ever dare to bully you again. Your entrance to Blue Wind Profound Palace is what we really should celebrate. I bet the entire city will rejoice on the day you officially enter Blue Wind Profound Palace. It was the dream he had seen many years ago. In this dream, the person he was getting married to wasn't Xia Qingyu, but Siduk Xuan. Moreover, Xia Yuanba had a powerful body, extraordinary talent, and a pair of eyes that shone with divine light. And why do these images and voices feel so real? These memories, suddenly, his soul world began shaking violently. It looked like it might collapse into itself. An infinite amount of images and voices intermingled chaotically in his mind, and his heart beat so hard and fast that it felt like it might implode at any moment. His consciousness was fading and his memories were blurring. It felt like a billion sticks were stirring up his soul sea. He wanted to scream and struggle, but he wasn't able to make even a single sound. Xia Yuanba, Xuan Xia Qingyu, Qing Yue. Suddenly, the turmoil in his soul sea came to a complete stop. Then his mind and his memories became clear like never before. Even his dreams had become as clear as yesterday. However, some things were growing the opposite. His old memories kept blurring more and more despite his mad struggles to keep them. In the end, he could only watch them depart his mind and even his soul completely. He stared at the gray world in front of him blankly and unmoving. "Do you recall them now?" The woman's voice spoke once more. The true memories that were hidden beneath the nothingness. Yun-Chi couldn't say a word. He felt like he'd suddenly fallen into an unwakeable dream. The baby your foster father, Xuanyin, did everything in his power to save wasn't the daughter of Xia Hongyi, Xia Qingyu, but the daughter of the governor of Floating Cloud City, Xuan. Just the same, the man who was so grateful toward Xuanyin that he publicly declared that his daughter would wed Xuanyin's son wasn't Xia Hongyi, but Xuan. Naturally, your fiancé was also Xuan, not Xia Qingyu. The Xia Yuanba in your memories was his true appearance until an extraordinary change overtook him when you were 16 years old. NNGH? Yun-Chi let out low moans from time to time. He was suffering not from pain, but a kind of confusion, separation, misalignment, and distortion that no word in his dictionary could properly describe. All he could say was that it felt absolutely unpleasant. All of his memories regarding Xia Yuanba before he was 16 had been altered. The Xia Yuanba in his memories now matched the Xia Yuanba in his dreams perfectly. A powerful physique, extraordinary talent, and a pair of eyes that seemed capable of seeing through one's soul. Just the same, all of his memories regarding Xia Qingyu before he was 16 had been cut out from his mind completely. They were already unnaturally shallow in the first place, but now he remembered them like he would an unforgotten dream, unreal and prone to vanishing at any moment. Moreover, memories of Xuan had replaced them. The amount of times he met with Xuan during the first 16 years of his life could be counted on one hand, but each one was as clear and heart-wrenching as yesterday. He could even remember every sneering word she said, every disdainful look she shot him, every playful bit of malice she wore on her face. In every memory where Xiao Lai told him about the story of Xuanyin saving a female baby, the baby had always been the governor's daughter. In his memories, Xia Yuanba didn't just have a powerful build, but also a domineering behavior to match. He had feared nothing and no one, and in his memories, Xia Yuanba was the only child Xia Hongyi had ever had. "Where's Qingyu? Where's Qingyu?" He frantically searched through the absolute mess he called his memories, but no matter how hard he tried, everything relating to her before he was 16 was just a transient, unforgotten dream. "Don't you understand yet?" Yun-Chi's appearance put a small sigh into the ancestral Will's voice. "Before you were 16, before your wedding day to be exact, Xia Qingyu never existed." "What do you mean that she never existed?" Yun-Chi somehow found the strength to squeeze the words out of his throat. The ancestral Will explained, "On the day you were to marry Xuan, someone poisoned the morning porridge she cooked for you. Although it was just a lowly mortal poison, it was absolutely fatal to someone with broken profound veins and a weak body like you. You were dead before the wedding ceremony had even begun. This was an irreparable blow to her, especially since she believed that she was the one who had caused your death. Sadness, self-blame, pain, despair. Her soul was burdened with so much sorrow that it began to fracture under its weight. As a result, the ancestral will, yes, it is I who am speaking to you right now, was awakened, or more accurately, forced out of my slumbering state." Yun-Chi. The ancestral will's voice grew distant again, and a very familiar scene appeared in his soul sea. Red curtains, burning red candles, a familiar layout. It was his room in the Xiao clan back then. It was the day he and Xia Qingyu, Xuan, got married, and one of the greatest turning points of his fate. Turning point. He had been reborn in the Azure Cloud continent after he was poisoned to death on his wedding day. When he jumped down Cloud's End cliff on the Azure Cloud continent, he revived again in his dead body with the memories of both lifetimes. It was the greatest mystery of his life. He had never found an answer to it. Even after he stood at the peak of the universe, he still had no idea what had truly happened to him back then. When he had returned to the Azure Cloud continent, he had been shocked to find that it was the Azure Cloud continent from many years ago. The amnesiac Su Linger had also turned back into a girl. Even more confusing was the fact that the young Su Linger had regained her memories with him at a later time. It proved that his life in the Azure Cloud continent wasn't a dream after all. Could the real reason behind all these inexplicable mysteries be? In the scene, he was lying lifelessly on his bed in his wedding clothes. His eyes were open, but glassy and utterly colorless. Beside him, Xiao Lai was pressing his hands against his heart and doing everything in his power to drive out the poison inside his body. His grandfather's lips were blue, and his face a deathly pale complexion. He was trying his best to remain calm, but the pain gathered in his eyes was enough to make anyone avert theirs. Xia Yuanba broke into a run toward the exit while roaring that profound palace mentor's name again and again. Xiao Lingxi was kneeling on the ground, clutching his cooling palms in a death grip and crying her heart out. Light suddenly dimmed at this moment. The scenes faded into black, the voices faded into black, everything faded into blackness until all that was left was a girl's despairing figure and sobs. To think that sorrow really can shatter one's soul, is this the power of a human's emotions? The crying girl slowly looked up in a daze. Who are you? I am another you, and you are another me. You sensed me the moment I appeared, didn't you? Save little Qi. At first, her murmur was soft as the wind. Then, as the scattered lights in her eyes narrowed into a beam of hope, she pleaded louder and hastier like a drowning person who found a straw to cling onto. Save little Qi, save little Qi. The death of a mortal is as insignificant as the scattering of a speck of dust in the universe. It doesn't deserve a reaction from you, much less this level of sorrow. The illusory voice resounded in the colorless world. Your soul has crumbled and I have awakened. This cycle has failed and our stainless sacred body will not be complete. No matter, there is no gain, but there is no loss either. You may as well reawaken your will now, experience this mortal plane as your mortal self, and postpone the completion of your reincarnation to the next life. Now, let our wills merge together once more. When you have returned to your true self, this insignificant memory will be buried in a universe of other memories. You won't feel any sadness toward his death any longer. No, no, the ancestral will approached, but what she got was firm rejection. Xiao Lingxi subconsciously pulled away from her own will. The emotions she radiated were fear and determination. She was the ancestral will before this life after all. Her current self couldn't comprehend it, but she could still vaguely sense the kind of existence she was. That was why she was afraid. She was afraid that she would treat her identity as Xiao Lingxi and even the person she cherished the most, Xiao Qi, as nothing if she accepted her. Save him, save him, save him, she pleaded in a whisper again and again. She pleaded with her other self to save Yun Qi. A long sigh resounded in the colorless world. How is my will so powerful despite being a newborn? Once upon a time, Yu was an existence who overlooked everything and everyone in the world. The extraordinary emotions of mortals have always been interesting to see, but that was all. To think that my emotions would burn this bright when Yu was reborn as a mortal. Save him, please save him. She kept repeating the same thing again and again. You can save him, you definitely have a way to save him. The cycle of life and death is difficult to defy. It is one of the basic laws Yu have established during the creation of the world. That being said, there is some wriggle room to this law. Yu have not completed our reincarnation, so Yu cannot reverse his death directly. However, Yu can reverse the wheel of time of this world to the point where he is still alive. This way, it will be as if he has never died in the first place, thus circumventing the laws Yu have put in place. However, I should be well aware of the price of doing so. It doesn't matter, nothing matters anymore, the girl muttered while shaking her head strongly. Her soul was still in shambles, and it was incapable of fitting anything besides the desire and determination to save Yun Qi. I just want him to come back to life. I just want my little Qi to come back to life. Your will is my will, especially since the will sitting in my mind is the strongest will I have ever had since the beginning of your existence. I won't be able to defy it. I are free to act as you wish without care for the consequences, but you must be aware that he is just a mortal, an incredibly fragile mortal even by mortal standards. He is almost incapable of weathering any danger as long as he is stuck with a body that is unable to cultivate. Unless he is protected by sufficient power, Anyone can drive him into a dead end just like today. Xianxia, you may be able to save him today, but are you really going to save him again and again and again? Every time you use this method to save him, your already incomplete sacred body of nothingness will be damaged more and more, not to mention that the amount of damage done will only increase with each repetition. Moreover, he won't live to see his 100th birthday given the state of his body. What will you do then? The girl's eyes grew unfocused once more. However, a strange, divine light gathered in her pupils almost instantly. In that case, give him part of your sacred body of nothingness. Give him the power to protect himself from anything. AI? Yet another long sigh resounded throughout the colorless world before the voice continued. The sacred body is born from the nothingness of primal chaos. It is also the ancestral body that only belongs to IU. To grant even a sliver of it to a mere mortal. What a ridiculous notion this is. However, UI can only obey what UI desire. Well, it is possible to grant him a sacred body of the mortal level, but you should know that your current condition won't even allow you to manifest your strength, much less gift him your powers directly. Even if it can be done, he still doesn't have the profound veins to bear our power or any power at all. Without power, anyone can take his life whether he has a sacred body or not. In that sense, the only good the sacred body will do for him is to extend his lifespan. Xianxia whispered while staring at the black nothingness in front of her. There exists countless lives and endless fates in this world. Why must his fate be so unfair? He was born a cripple, scorned and treated with indifference because of his disability, and now he was killed when he was but a young man. Why must my little Chi suffer such a fate? A long silence later, the voice asked, I wish to rewrite his fate. He will have a sacred body and his fate will be rewritten. Her voice sounded unusually low and slow. She seemed to be awakening her memories, because Yun Chi had never seen such eyes on Xianxia until now. Not to mention that the declaration she made was something only the ancestral god herself possessed the right to declare. The sacred body will grant him the ability to accept any form of power, including the laws of nothingness, that a mortal should never be able to contact. He will gain power beyond this maximum limit of this godless world in just a very short time. Altering his fate will ensure that he will always survive tribulations no matter how dire they are. He will be blessed with a luck so great that all of the world's greatest opportunities and fortunes will fall on him alone. I can do it. I know that I can do it. The voice responded, fate is the one thing no one should ever interfere with. It is one of the most basic, but most important laws IU have established since the creation of the universe. It is because the smallest interference with the lowliest mortal may result in an unimaginably huge change in the future. Luck is a component of fate, and so is balanced by the strictest of laws. It cannot be created out of nothing even by you. If I must alter his fate, the only thing that I may attempt at your current strength is the chain of fate. The chain of fate, Xianxia whispered as she attempted to identify its concept with her blurry knowledge. All living things in the current universe already have their fates fixed. Therefore, the chain of fate can only be applied to a new life, which means that life must first be created before his fate may be changed. You may address this creation, this medium that will be created to change his fate, as the artifact of fate. However, this new life is still a life of its own. Its fate will be impossibly unfair and cruel due to the unbreakable laws of the balance of fate. Will I continue on this course despite knowing this? The girl closed her eyes without any hesitation and said, I told you already. I only want him to come back to life. I only want him to lead a peaceful life and never have to suffer such a pitiful fate anymore. Nothing else matters, nothing. Very well, the price is huge, but it will be done. One cycle of reincarnation is necessary to create the sacred body of nothingness. The mirror of samsara hasn't yet regained its strength, so IU must awaken it by force to make this work. He will reincarnate on this same planet. That continent named Azure Cloud seems like a good destination. While he reincarnates on the Azure Cloud continent and goes through the necessary life to fully accept the sacred body, I will pause the wheel of time of the entire world, 3 besides the Azure Cloud continent. During this time, I will also create the artifact of fate, rationalize its existence, and alter all the karma involved. Thankfully, Floating Cloud City is just a small city with a small population and few connections to the outside world. Fixing its karma of cognition should be relatively simple even considering your incomplete and weakened powers. It should be done within 5 years. When his life cycle is complete and he returns to the body of Xiao Qi, I will reverse the time of the Azure Cloud continent back to what it was before and restart the wheels of time once more. Tears continued to slide down the girl's cheeks, but the shattering behind her eyes wasn't as bad as it once was. She murmured, "This way my little Qi will return and he won't be as humble or fragile anymore." "So, what will be the artifact of fate you wish to tie to his fate?" Xiao Lingxi replied slowly and dazedly. "I'm his little aunt, so I can never be his wife. However, Siduk Xuan doesn't deserve to be his wife, so I want this person to replace Siduk Xuan and be his wife instead. She would need to have a good deal of talent and willpower, a cool exterior on the outside, but a soft heart on the inside. I want her to be able to protect him before he grows to full power and be capable of eliminating or blocking any and all danger toward him." There was another long silence before the voice spoke. "There exists an extraordinarily refined wisp of energy of the primordial universe in this tiny floating cloud city. It may even be the purest primordial energy in the current universe. It is currently resting in that youngster named Xia Yuanba. Should the primordial energy be allowed to fuse completely with his body, he would gain the divine body of great rage, a body that is never before seen in this godless world. 1/10 of the energy has already fused with his body. The rest shall be taken away from him and bestowed upon the artifact of fate." Xia Yuanba's talent originated from his mother, the woman named Dongzhu by Xia Hongyi, but was really a god-realm woman named Yue Wugu. Her divine, stainless body is a miracle in the current universe, and she would have had a great future if not for the twist of fate that caused her to fall to this small city and made her the wife of the mortal, Xia Hongyi. Your current strength is insufficient to create life out of nothing. For the artifact of fate to subsume Xia Yuanba's primordial energy perfectly, her blood must take after Xia Yuanba's mother, Yue Wugu. As for the father, a short pause later, the voice continued, "Xia Hongyi is ultimately just mortal. His bloodline is too weak and murky. If the artifact of fate were to be born from his blood, it will only diminish the energy of the primordial universe she has subsumed. If it wasn't for her sorrowful fate, Yue Wugu would never have been separated from her original lover, the moon god Emperor Yue Wuya. He possesses one of the more revered bloodlines of the current universe, the moon god bloodline. His blood will be an excellent choice to create the artifact of fate. In a sense, the creation of the artifact of fate will fulfill their lifelong wish, even if the method is most questionable. The artifact of fate will be born in Floating Cloud City. To her knowledge, she is the daughter of Xia Hongyi and Yue Wugu. However, she will feel a bloodline resonance far stronger than is normal when she is close to the blood she is created from. If one day she encounters Yue Wuya, the resulting bloodline resonance may expose the truth. Hopefully, the distance between these two worlds is far enough that it won't happen too soon. The Northern Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace is a sect left behind by a denizen of the God realm. It will be the artifact of fate's sect so that it may grant them further opportunity to make contact with the higher plane. The shape of the artifact of fate was already formed while the voice was speaking. She would be the daughter of Yue Wugu and Yue Wuya. She would believe that Xia Hongyi was her father and become a disciple of Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace. She would steal Xia Yuanba's energy of the primordial universe as her own and marry Yun Qi as his wife. She will believe that Xia Hongyi is her father, so her surname will be Xia as a matter of course. Xia Hongyi is a man of single-minded love, and his love for Yue Wugu has never faded even though she has been gone from his life for many years. In that case, the artifact of fate shall be named Xia Qingyu, Xia's love for the moon. Xia Qingyu, the girl whispered the name. She will protect little Qi well, right? There is no such thing as absolution even for an artifact of fate. Yu may have created her, but Yu have no control over what she ultimately becomes. He and her final futures are even more unpredictable. However, he will be blessed by great luck as long as the chain of fate remains unbroken. He will keep obtaining fortune most people cannot even dream of having, and combine that with his sacred body of nothingness. He will reach the point where he surpasses every living being in the universe in a very short amount of time. She, on the other hand, fate automatically seeks balance, and since they are tied together by the chain of fate, his great fortune will be her great misfortune. Everything she cares about shall suffer the cruelest of fates. As a sister, her sibling will face the threat of death again and again. As a disciple, her sect will face the threat of destruction. As a daughter, her parents will meet a terrible end. As a parent, her children will die an early death. And as a ruler, the land she governs will dissolve into dust. Her misfortune is Xiao Qi's fortune. That is how the chain of fate is. That isn't all. She is a creation of nothingness, so it is only a matter of time before she sees through the veil and realizes the truth of her being. He may have grown to the point where he no longer needs the artifact of fate to protect him, but she will never be able to forgive herself. She may choose to end her life so that misfortune won't befall those she cares for any longer. An unimaginable cost and the cruelest chain of fate. Will you still do this? This was her last time asking. The light in Xiao Lingxi's eyes remained unchanged. She said slowly and firmly, "The memories of the ancestral god seem so close yet so far. Therefore, I cannot ascertain what I would have done as her. But right now I will save him, even if I have to bury the entire world to do it. This is the final will, the never-changing will." The voice grew distant, and cracks began appearing on the pitch-black world. "At the cost of 600 cycles of samsara, your might will shall be done. 1. Of course Xiao Lingxi was going to give her the middle finger. 3. Leaves, do you understand now?" The ancestral will's voice rang in Yun Qi's soul sea once more, but it felt like it was a lifetime away. He didn't give a response even after a long time had passed. Yun Qi's soul sea was so silent it was as if he had died. "Xia Qingyu is the artifact of fate. It was always a matter of time before she discovered the truth of herself. As for you, your affinity with nothingness will grow as you cultivate the world-defying heaven manual, but you can never surpass the ancestral nothingness. Therefore, the occasional dreams are the most you can glimpse of the truth. Even then, you will only treat the dreams as what they are, dreams. You won't think of them as the truth. In other words, even with his current mastery over the laws of nothingness, he would never have discovered the truth on his own. He would have been kept in the dark forever if the ancestral will hadn't told him everything. I never thought that I would be the one who would tell you everything when I started all this. Even a fate that has been engineered is so difficult to predict." There was still no response from Yun Qi. If this had happened to another person, if this had been a legend from the distant past, he would have needed a long time to digest and ruminate over it. However, he was smack dab in the middle of everything, so of course it took him even more time to digest it all. Even now, none of it felt real at all. Xia Qingyu was created for me. The day we married, the day she and I met for the first time, it might very well be the first day she was born to the primal chaos. No wonder she could never feel any concern for Xia Hongyi. No wonder Xia Hongyi couldn't be sad over her death. Their relationship was something that had been artificially implanted into their consciousnesses, and their shared memories were merely the result of a karma fix. How could there be any familial love between them when they had never even spent a single day with each other? No wonder Yue Wuya had stopped for Xia Qingyu despite not knowing her, and why he had given her his love without any reservation. It was because of instinct and the extraordinary bloodline resonance that existed between the two. No wonder the heaven-smiting devil emperor, a woman with a tragic fate, had said that Xia Qingyu's fate was the most sorrowful she had ever met. As it turned out, sorrowful didn't even begin to describe how tragic it really was. No wonder she had made that ultimate choice and refused to divulge anything even during her final moments. She even went so far as to create a great lie to fool him into thinking that she truly was an evil person who more than deserved her death. No wonder she had wept before Yue Wuya and Yue Wugu's graves and claimed that she was the one who killed them and Yuanba. No wonder she had chosen to clothe herself in red on her final day. She had arrived in this world in red, and she decided that she would depart in red as well. No wonder, as it turned out, he really had died when he was 16. The reason any power or bloodline, including the absolute opposites that were light profound energy and dark profound energy, could exist harmoniously in his body, thus stunning even the heaven-smiting devil emperor herself, was because his sacred body had been the ancestral god's own sacred body. The heretic god's profound veins, the phoenix, the rage god, the heavenly wolf, the golden crow, the ice phoenix, even Honger, Yuer, the divine miracle of life, and the eternal calamity of darkness. 4 of the 7 heavenly profound treasures were on his person right now. The world piercer was held by one of his beloveds, Shui Meiyin, as well. He had gone through countless tribulations in his life, but they were always accompanied by great progress or even great evolution after he overcame them. Even when he was still in the profound sky continent, Jasmine had said multiple times that she didn't believe in fate until she came to know Yun Qi. She had declared unironically that he was a person of great destiny. He had begun his journey at the age of 16. and it had taken him only 20 years to become the first true emperor of the God realm. The first 16 years of his life had been perfectly ordinary, but the 2 decades that came after his wedding day were filled with opportunities and great fortunes that another person wouldn't even dare to dream of in 1,000 lifetimes. As it turned out, fate really did exist in this world. As it turned out, everything was driven by it. But the price of this fate, the cost it took to climb to place him at the peak of the pyramid was, I'm just thinking about something. If you would believe it, it is even more bizarre than the past 5 years of experiences you've told us about. On the night he returned to Blue Pole Star, his father Yun Qinghang had looked at the stars and let out a melancholic sigh. Are you really my son? You are my and Yuru's son, and both our blood runs in your veins. The world may turn upside down, but that is one fact that will never change. However, I have never known the world named the God Realm. But knowing that someone from that world can turn the entire Blue Pole Star to dust with a simple wave of their hand, I have no doubt that they are a kind of existence that I fundamentally don't understand. In fact, I may never understand it for as long as I live. But you, from the time you departed this world to the time you became emperor of all things in the universe, it hasn't even been 2 decades yet. Yun Qinghang closed his eyes for a bit. I just can't help but wonder if I, Yun Qinghang, truly am capable of sowing a son like you. A person's destiny, horizon, and limits are often determined by their bloodline and birth. That is a cruel but immutable fact. However, you currently stand at a level neither I nor the entire Yun clan can ever hope to look up to, Chair. Can you blame me for thinking what I did? If I am being honest, I feel more melancholic than proud after learning of everything you've achieved, son. His father's laments were spot on after all. With his level of background and talent, he would at most be Yun Qinghang's equal even if he wasn't born a cripple. And he never encountered any true hardships in his life. He wasn't the heaven-chosen child he thought he was, but he had definitely been chosen by someone. And that person was the final incarnation of the ancestral god herself. His status as Emperor Yun, his turbulent yet dazzling life, it had been founded on the sacrifice of the ancestral god and Xia Qingyu's most tragic life. No, it wasn't even good enough to be called a life. Why? Yun Qi's voice sounded raspy and unclear when he finally spoke again. It sounded like a strained groan from the lowest depths of his soul. You are the ancestral god. Even the king of the world is but a speck of dust to you. Why would you sacrifice 600 cycles of reincarnation for a crippled mortal like me? The ancestral will answered indifferently. If the ancestral god incarnate next to you had been anyone from the previous 999 cycles, then none of this would have happened. You are aware how nonsensical it is for the ancestral god to sacrifice her sacred body to save one mortal and 600 cycles to forge the cruel chain of fate. However, the ancestral will must fall aslumber during the 1000th cycle to attain perfection, and Xianxia is this cycle's ancestral god. Her will is the main will of the ancestral god, while mine was considered foreign because I was prematurely awakened before our wills could fully merge. No matter how weak the main will is, it is still higher than the foreign ancestral will. As a result, I am unable to defy her. The ancestral god was the one who caused everything, but the decision was really made by a despairing 15-year-old girl who had just lost her true love. Yun Qi. I had not foreseen this until it happened. I have watched the world for eons, but it is clear that I still underestimated the power of a person's emotions. Life was like a dream, and the world an illusion. However, the reality he was living was something not even a dream could weave. He recalled the Xianxia he knew before and after he was 16. Her eyes and her behavior were the same as ever. Does she remember anything about this? Yun Qi asked softly. No, the ancestral will answered directly. She rejected everything about me. In this life, I only wants to be Xianxia and Xianxia only. She doesn't want anything to taint her identity and her feelings until she reaches the end of her natural life. That was why her memories were reversed just like your death was reversed when the wheels of time were turned back. Again, this was her choice, and I could only obey it. I should have returned to sleep and awaited my next cycle after everything was done. But I was curious about the result of the chain of fate I personally created, and both your and the artifact of fate's ending. The ancestral will didn't tell him that Xianxia, the main will's influence, was the main reason she became uncontrollably concerned toward Yun Qi's fate. Therefore, I stayed awake and roamed the universe just as I did before while observing your and Xia Qingyu's lives. However, It also caused Xianxia to occasionally experience my memories as illusions or dreams. When I finally fall asleep, all these dreams and illusions will vanish forever. She will never know that she is the ancestral god, never know about her heartbreak, and remain the purest Xianxia until the end of her natural life. You will forever keep this a secret from her. Otherwise, her overly soft heart will surely be mired in eternal regret. Are you leaving? Yunqi noticed the finality in her tone. You have already become the unparalleled emperor of this world. The artifact of fate has also chosen to end her own life. My wish as the ancestral god has been fulfilled, and I've fully witnessed the entanglement of fate that is caused by the chain of fate. Now that the artifact of fate is deceased, the chain of fate between the two of you has disappeared as well. There is no longer any reason for me to remain in this world. Starting today, I will return to my slumber in order to recover my lost origin power as soon as possible. The ancestral will sighed. Another 600 cycles of life await me. I can only hope that my concerns regarding the abyss are just me worrying over nothing. Telling you the truth of everything is my final labor for me. You should understand what I mean. Yunqi couldn't say anything to that. It had taken the ancestral god 600 cycles of reincarnation and Xia Qingyu's lifelong tragedy to give him the life he currently enjoyed. The relationship between you and the ancestral god, Xianxia, is the natural product of your 15 years of interaction. Her love for you runs as deep as the soul itself. I have not interfered with the artifact of fate, Xia Qingyu's emotions, in any way. After discovering the truth of herself far sooner than she should have, she chose to submit to her fate instead of defying it. Her only act of defiance was in choosing her own ending. She fought against her fate, but not the boons that were gifted to you as a result of it. You had left your image in her mind during the short period you were together after your marriage. During her days in Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace, she would sometimes remember the day you walked out of the Xiao clan. When you gave her hope at the Heaven Basin Secret Realm, your image became permanently fixed to her soul. To her, that brief moment may as well have been an eternity. The bonds between you two may have begun from an obligatory promise, but that was the day she truly thought of herself as your wife. She never stopped doing so even until the end. Yunqi, you are the luckiest man in the entire universe. For you, Xianxia chose to remain as Xianxia for eternity. For you, Xia Qingyu submitted to her cruel fate and even painted herself as a monster just so that you wouldn't be hurt by her death. Neither of them ever regretted their decisions. You don't have the right to lead a bad life. Don't let these truths become shackles and burden your soul. What you have today is the culmination of both Xianxia and Xia Qingyu's wishes. If only for everything that they have done for you, you must not let yourself sink into a mire of inescapable darkness. When you have shed all of your tears, sorrow, and guilt, please greet Xianxia, the woman who will forever wait for you to return home with a warm smile and think of Xia Qingyu, the woman whose fate was tied to yours fondly. For their sakes and everyone else who loves you, you can do it. Can't you? The Soul Sea world started shaking violently. The ancestral will's parting words imprinted themselves into every corner of his soul and broke the dam that had been containing his turbulent emotions completely. This is it, then. Goodbye, Yunqi. As the ancestral will's voice grew more and more distant, she said one last time in a very, very gentle voice, "May you and my incarnation enjoy eternal peace." When the Soul Sea world faded completely, Yunqi finally broke out into a full cry at the silent hill. Her last worries resolved, the ancestral will finally turned herself off and returned to sleep. Right before she completely disappeared, though, a trace of puzzlement flashed through her consciousness. She remembered the cracks that appeared suddenly after Xia Qingyu fell into the Abyss of Nothingness. The chain of fate between Yunqi and Xia Qingyu had been formed using the mirror of samsara as the medium. The chain of fate had disappeared when Xia Qingyu passed away. There was nothing unnatural about that. However, that crack on the mirror of samsara it was almost as if the chain of fate had been broken by some sort of foreign force, and the resulting blowback had caused the crack on the mirror of samsara. If that was true, what in primal chaos was happening inside the abyss? What is the heaviest thing in this world? To Yunqi, it was a love debt that could never be paid back in full. Xia Qingyu had given him her whole life and left behind only infinite regret, guilt, sorrow, infamy, and an old bronze mirror for herself. Yunqi held the bronze mirror gently as his tears splattered against its surface. Realistically, palming the bronze mirror was the most intimate he could be with her now. If he still wished to hold her in his arms, he could only do so in his dreams, now and forever. She used to treasure the bronze mirror so much that she wore it around her neck day and night. However, it later became a constant reminder of her essence and the cruel truth behind it. Even still, she probably hoped that Jin Yue would disobey her order when she entrusted the object to her to destroy. She was an intelligent woman, and she knew Jin Yue like the back of her hand after all. Her fate pained her and filled her with resentment, but it was still her only memento of her late mother. That was why she ultimately gave up the choice to her most trusted aide, Jin Yue. Later on, she forbade Jin Yue from getting close to her to the point where she wouldn't even speak to her unless they were separated by a curtain. It was because she was afraid that she would bring calamity upon her aide. The fact that she chased her away instead of making her leave with Yue Wuji and the moon gods was proof of her love for Jin Yue. However, he slowly flexed his stiffened joints and rose to his feet. The scene before him was exactly the same as it had been, but the world in his eyes was no longer the same as before. It was a world without the ancestral will, Xia Qingyu, and the chain of fate. You don't have the right to lead a bad life. If it wasn't for the ancestral will's rebuke, he would have taken much longer to step out of his dark mental prison. He pressed the bronze mirror against his chest and whispered, "From the Xiao Qi whom everyone could scorn, to the Emperor Yun whom everyone had to look up to. Once, I believed that my journey had begun with the heretic god's inheritance. It is only now that I have realized that it was your whole life as well. Mei Yin once asked me to treat the world with kindness and compassion. I now know that that was your wish. Despite everything you suffered at the hands of fate, you would still repay it with the greatest good. Watch me, Qingyu. I promise I will live my life the best way I can, live better than everyone else in this universe. And most of all, protect the world who once joined our fates together and made us husband and wife." Many years later, when Emperor Yun became worshipped as every living being's eternal faith, when no one from the lowest lower realms to the highest king realms would allow even the slightest slander on his person, no one knew that his actions were spurred by this, his eternal promise to Xia Qingyu. Space shifted, and Yun Qi appeared in front of Kai Weiao, Kai and Yinger, Shui Meiyan, and Mu Xuanyin. He stared at the surprised women who had been watching over him all this time, shot them a faint smile, and spoke in a raspy but warm voice. "Sorry for worrying you all again. I had a long dream. I think I understand why my dreams have been so dark now. It's because someone stole all the light in the dreams and reflected them all into my reality. They continued to do so even after their world had succumbed to eternal darkness. That is why," he opened his arms wide, "I no longer have the right to disappoint any ray of light that exists in this world." His soft words struck their hearts like a hammer and slowly melted the heavy pressure and worry they had been holding until now. "Big brother Yun Qi!" Shui Meiyan jumped into Yun Qi's embrace and cried her heart out. She had already cried too many times in the past couple days, and they only worsened the weight and pain in her heart each time she gave in to the impulse. But no more. Finally, she could cry in relief instead of pain. Yun Qi held Meiyan tightly. She had already endured too much for his sake over the past couple years. From now on, he wouldn't allow her to hide a soul-wrenching pain behind her smile any longer. He suddenly looked at Kai Weiao and asked, "Can an emperor have two empresses, Weiao?" Surprise flashed across Kai Weiao's features, but she quickly broke into a smile and answered, "If you were any other emperor, then there are many things you must consider before making such a decision. But you aren't any other emperor, are you? Whatever your wish may be, you simply need to will it to see it done." Yun Qi could have made the decision without asking her opinion, but he still did it because he respected her and cared for her feelings. She understood that. "You wish to make Xia Qingyu your queen?" Mu Xuanyin cut to the chase in the most direct manner possible. "Yes," Yun Qi nodded. "What I owe her can never, ever be repaid. I can only. Although he had returned to a state of calm a while ago, a light poke at the wound still pained him to the point of suffocation. He shook his head to steady himself before continuing. "When she and I were married in Floating Cloud City, we had had a feast, a ceremony, the blessing of the elders, and half the city as our witnesses. Every step of the wedding ceremony, escorting the bride, crossing the brazier, ritual kneeling to heaven and earth, and binding our hair together one, was also carried out properly. We were without a doubt husband and wife in every way. My declaration of divorce back then was just me spilling my blood to vent my emotions. It neither followed the customs nor obeyed the law, so it is completely ineffective. Moreover, our names are still written in the marriage records of Floating Cloud City. Therefore, we have always been husband and wife. Even before he realized the truth, he never asked anyone to remove his and Xia Qingyu's name from Floating Cloud City's marriage records. It was almost as if he had completely forgotten about it until just now. So yes, I wish to posthumously confer her as my empress. Understood, Kai Wao said only one word, but there was no hesitation whatsoever. Also, he continued, I wish to rename our future emperor realm as, does Cloud Moon Realm sound okay to you? A smiling Kai Wao voiced his thoughts like she could read his mind. Yunqi was clearly doing everything in his power to make up for past mistakes. One might even say that his decisions were made thoughtlessly. However, Xia Qingyu was gone forever. No matter how much he tried to make it up to her, it was all empty and meaningless. Suddenly, the silent Xianxia Yinger turned away and fell soundlessly toward the ground. A hand caught her wrist firmly before she could do so, however. Her eyes trembled against her will. The only person who could grab her without triggering her defensive instinct at all was Yunqi. Where are you going? Yunqi's voice rang behind her. There wasn't enough emotion in his voice for her to identify his current feelings. She replied without turning back, You probably don't want to see me right now. Come find me in the Brahma Monarch God realm when you're ready. Xianxia Yinger was an extremely prideful woman. She had tried to keep her voice perfectly indifferent and dignified. However, a slight tremor still managed to slip into her voice. The grip around her wrist loosened a little, but Yunqi didn't let go of her. Instead, he spoke in an extraordinarily warm and gentle voice. If she was the moon who gave me light when I was sunk in darkness, then you are the shadow who never left my side even during my darkest moments. After everything we went through together, do you really think I would let you escape from my side? Xianxia Yinger froze, and her eyes suddenly turned terribly blurry. Remember what I said about the future back when we were still in the northern divine region, he said softly while staring at one side of her face and golden hair. I've never forgotten about it, and you shouldn't either. Kai Wao. Muk Xuanyin? Xianxia Yinger didn't give him an answer. A breeze that was in no way chilly brushed against their bodies, but she started trembling harder and harder and harder. It just wouldn't stop no matter what. Still not letting go of Xianxia Yinger, Yunqi patted Shui Meiyin once on the back before whispering, Take me to that place, Meiyin. Xianxia, you should come with us as well. Xianxia Yinger didn't listen to him, however. She abruptly flung his hand aside before shooting toward the horizon at high speed. She never turned back because she didn't want Yunqi to see her face. Shui Meiyin was an intelligent girl. She immediately knew where Yunqi was referring to even though he had been vague about it. MN, she responded softly before summoning the World Piercer. A faint crimson flash later, both of them vanished into thin air. Muk Xuanyin and Kai Wao exchanged a glance with each other. He has changed, Muk Xuanyin said with a sigh, but it was clearly tinged with relief. No, it's the world in his eyes that's changed completely, Kai Wao replied smilingly. MN, Muk Xuanyin nodded in agreement. Say, do you think we should tell him about Yunzai? Kai Wao asked suddenly. It was rare to see Kai Wao consult anyone on anything since she was usually so intelligent and decisive. This was one thing she really couldn't decide, however. Was this a suitable time to tell him the other secret, or would there never be such a time? Muk Xuanyin shook her head. It's best we forget about this. Also, you're the Empress. You should worry about yourself first. Kai Wao bloomed into a smile. I wouldn't mind making your child the crown prince, though. Muk Xuanyin turned away and said, I leave his requests to you. Wuxin must be worried after her father suddenly went missing for so many days. Muk Xuanyin went away, but Kai Wao didn't leave immediately. She watched the sky for a very long time. Xia Qingyu, I wasn't wrong about you after all. She whispered with a smile and finally put down the puzzlement that had rooted itself in her mind for too long. Or did she? What was the reason behind your final departure, though? You wouldn't say it, he won't say it. Secret, what a wonderful yet annoying word. She continued, smiling. I suppose I may never be able to let go of you. In a distant corner of the southern divine region, Yunqi and Shui Meiyin appeared before a barrier that was forged using the World Piercer's spatial divine power as the base, and the Moon God Realm's unique hidden moon power as the support. Although it was only a thin layer, it was rough to conceal the auras hidden behind the barrier to a great extent. This special barrier was the main reason Kai Wao was ultimately unable to find the vanished moon gods despite mobilizing the forces of all 4 divine regions to find them. Now that he was close enough, Yunqi could sense 8 different moon god auras residing inside the barrier. There were also the auras of 27 moon god divine envoys. Sister Qingyu found this planet and laid down this barrier almost from the very beginning, Shui Meiyin said softly. She told me that she was going to hide the core of the moon god realm at this place after big brother Yun Qi returned. She also asked me to ask you to pardon them and return the moon god realm to them after you became the lord and master of the god realm. Meiyin, you are the one who saved his family and his life. Therefore, I'm sure he'll agree to your request no matter what. I'm sure that someone as intelligent as you will come up with a better way than me to explain things, a better method that will lead to a better outcome. Shui Meiyin could never forget anything Xia Qingyu had told her. But Yun Qi didn't say anything. As he began walking, Shui Meiyin made a slicing motion with the world piercer and followed behind Yun Qi into the barrier. No one detected their entry at all. The moon god's auras immediately became clear after they entered the barrier. Surprisingly, all 8 moon gods and 27 moon god divine envoys were present at the scene. Moreover, it sounded like a fierce argument was going on between the moon gods, so much so that some of their auras were going out of control. 1. I'm leaving this damned place no matter what. Rumble! There was a loud bang, and the fragile lower realm planet beneath their feet groaned in a way that suggested that it might be destroyed at any moment. Enough! Yue Wuji rebuked the crimson cruel moon god while keeping a death grip on his arm. The entire god realm has fallen to Yun Qi, and even the surviving god emperors are treading on thin ice. You're basically committing suicide if you head out there right now. I would rather die than to continue living like this any longer. The crimson cruel moon god shook Yue Wuji's hand aside and uttered with bloodshot eyes. 3 years. It's been 3 years since we came to this god-forsaken place. Do you have any idea how I felt for the past 3 years? We are the bearers of the moon god inheritance, and we were glorious beyond imagination. But today, we are forced to hide in this lower realm like dogs. No, even a dog has more freedom and dignity than us. All the moon gods and moon god divine envoys wore complicated expressions on their faces. This is the late god emperor's final order. Yue Wuji rebuked with a deep frown on his face. Everyone underestimated Yun Qi and the power of the northern divine region back then. If it wasn't for her plans, we would have perished to Yun Qi's might a long time ago. We would have met the same end as eternal heaven. That again? I've heard that so much I'm sick of it. The crimson cruel moon god uttered through gritted teeth. Also, why do you think we're in this state today? It's all because of her. Crimson cruel. The blue jade moon god stepped forward and said angrily, "You will not disrespect or slander master." Slander? The crimson cruel moon god swept his gaze across everyone's faces before jabbing a finger at them. Do you all still think that my accusation is slander? The late god emperor was the wife of Yun Qi. She might have chosen to join his enemies back then, but everyone knows that it was the only rational choice she could have made back then. You all know how many king realms Yun Qi has pardoned since uniting the 4 divine regions. He would have pardoned the moon god realm as well if the late god emperor wasn't stupid and ruthless enough to attempt to kill Yun Qi twice and destroy his star realm. That's why Yun Qi has punished the moon god realm harder than any other star realm in the primal chaos. That's why the moon god realm was utterly destroyed and why we're stuck in this. Shut up, Chiang. There was a blue flash and the crimson cruel moon god felt a dark green-colored blade pressed up against his throat. Yao Yue, the blue jade moon god, uttered with a slightly disheveled aura, "One more word of disrespect toward master, and I shall kill you myself." But crimson cruel is right, another moon god lamented. Why are you defending her even now, Yao Yue? Enough! Shut your mouth! Yue Wuji glared at the speaker before facing crimson cruel once more. You are free to commit suicide if you want, but know that you'll be dragging all of us with you to the grave the moment you reveal our location. We barely managed to escape with the moon god inheritance intact, and now you're going to destroy it all on a whim. He lowered his volume before continuing. Just endure for a bit longer. The late god emperor told me that someone would come and take us outside. When the day comes, we'll be able to leave this place safely, and be laughed at by the entire world. The crimson cruel moon god roared. Eternal heaven, southern sea, dragon god, they may have been wiped out, but at least they've all fought against Yun Qi before. However, we escaped with our tails between our legs before ever engaging Yun Qi. What a joke, what a shame. Even I cannot bring myself to look at my own face with anything but scorn. So what? What is more important, our pride or the moon god inheritance? Yue Wuji rebuked the crimson cruel moon god even harsher than before. I repeat, the reason we survive to this day isn't because we're too cowardly to die, but because we need to keep the moon god inheritance alive. Do you really want to see our legacy severed permanently like eternal heaven or southern sea? Yue Wuji had accepted the imperial moon glazed pearl from Xia Qingyu, which meant that he was the current moon god emperor. However, his authority obviously couldn't compare to either Xia Qingyu's or Yue Wuya's. He was incapable of truly commanding the moon gods. The crimson cruel moon god pushed Yue Wuji and tried to say something. Then both his expression and his body froze as if he had been struck by lightning. He wasn't the only one who noticed it. Everyone was looking up in shock as well. Their living nightmare was standing just 1.5 kilometers above their heads. Yun Chi. The moon gods immediately summoned their powers. Whatever resentment they held toward one another was immediately tossed aside as they stood together as one. However, they still couldn't help but tremble as if they had been submerged in the coldest hell. Standing at the forefront of the group, Yue Wuji clenched his fingers tightly enough to break them. Knowing just how deeply Yun Chi loathed the moon god realm, he could already envision the worst-case scenario in his mind's eye. Yun Chi watched them one by one. He could feel their fear, their growing despair, and their grim determination to fight until the bitter end. Yue Wuji, Yun Chi began, the imperial moon-glazed pearl is still with you, right? Yue Wuji gritted his teeth and matched Yun Chi's eyes without giving an inch. So what if it is? The entire world may be in your palm right now, but this is one thing you will not have. We will live and die together with the imperial moon-glazed pearl. The imperial moon-glazed pearl belongs to the moon gods. I will not take it away from you, nor will I allow anyone to take it from you. Yun Chi was looking down from above, but he made sure to lighten his tone a little. Whatever Yue Wuji or the moon gods behind him were expecting Yun Chi to say, it clearly wasn't this. I came here today to make a request, Yun Chi continued. The astonishment in the moon god's eyes grew even bigger when they heard Yun Chi using the word request. I cannot restore the moon god realm I destroyed, so I can only build a new one and hope that it will be sufficient. I will need the aid of all of you to do this. There was neither killing intent nor soul-shattering devilish pressure. There were only words that they couldn't believe they were hearing at all. Yue Wuji shook his head as if to wake himself up before asking, What do you mean by that? I've decided to posthumously confer Xia Qingyu the title of my empress, even though it's... Yun Chi sucked in a light breath before furrowing his brows. The moon god realm was her greatest attachment. I will do everything in my power and utilize every resource that can be to restore the moon god realm to its former glory. If you are willing to help me, then come to Emperor Yun City in half a month. Yue Wuji's eyeballs looked like they might pop out of their sockets. He became as silent as a statue. A long time after Yun Chi and Shui Meiyin left, the moon gods still weren't able to regain the full faculties of their minds. What really happened to you for the past couple days, big brother Yun Chi? After they returned to the god realm, Shui Meiyin eyed Yun Chi up and down while holding his arm. I can't help but feel like you've changed somehow. Yun Chi shook his head smilingly. I don't want to lie to you, so I'm just going to put it like this. It might look like I was just sitting on that hill and doing nothing for the past couple of days, but I really was going through the most unbelievable experience in my entire life. It was so unbelievable that no one would believe me even if I were to tell them the truth. Shui Meiyin grew even more surprised. I cannot tell you what it is, though. As it turned out, there really are secrets that you can't divulge to anyone in this world. He could never reveal the ancestral god's secret. Suddenly, Yun Chi shifted his gaze and came to a stop. It was because he had sensed Xia Yuanba. They were in a middle star realm of the southern divine region called the Nine Faces realm. Two divine origin realm profound practitioners were currently doing battle atop a vast profound platform. One of them was none other than Xia Yuanba. Xia Yuanba had been progressing by leaps and bounds ever since he entered the god realm. He was now a level 6 divine origin realm profound practitioner, and not far away from entering level 7 divine origin realm. However, his opponent was a true level 8 divine origin realm profound practitioner. Usually, the battle between divine origin realm profound practitioners wasn't worth watching in a middle star realm. However, the sight of Xia Yuanba going toe-to-toe against an opponent 2 levels above him had caused the spectators' blood to boil like never before. Xia Yuanba's roars sounded like that of a bloodthirsty beast. Again and again he was knocked to the ground, but again and again he rose to his feet to challenge his opponent again. His body was covered in wounds, but the power running through his body barely showed any signs of weakening at all. It was almost as if he would never run out of energy. At first, Xia Yuanba's opponent had looked down on him because he was 2 levels weaker. That easiness gradually turned to seriousness, and then from seriousness to dread. Rumble. Xia Yuanba roared again and charged toward his opponent once more. The power clash resulted in a rumble that almost shouldn't belong to that of a divine origin realm practitioner. And for the first time, the person being blown away wasn't Xia Yuanba, but his opponent who had been dominant this entire time. Bang! After his opponent crashed onto the ground, he didn't climb back to his feet immediately. Instead, he backed away from Yuanba on his butt, waved his hand repeatedly, and said, "Stop! Stop! I forfeit. You're a goddamn monster." The audience's roars filled the air, and Xia Yuanba finally dropped to one knee. Even so, there was no concealing the excited glint in his eyes. "Very good." The elder responsible for the selection nodded. "Xia Yuanba, you don't need to participate in the ladder elimination tests anymore. Heal your injuries and be ready to join the 22nd court in 3 days. No one objected to this decision. To battle a level 8 Divine Origin Realm Profound Practitioner, as a level 6 Divine Origin Realm Profound Practitioner, until they lost their very will to fight. Anyone could see that Xia Yuanba was an unparalleled genius. No, Xia Yuanba was just about to give his response when a low and dignified voice spoke up. All surrounding noises vanished into complete silence, and even the elders were bending their backs a little and shouting fearfully, "We greet the great realm king." This was an outer disciple selection test. To say that they weren't expecting the great realm king's attention would be an understatement. HMPH, the tyrannical emperor's divine veins are a miracle from the heavens themselves. Like I would let him be wasted in your hands. His voice grew even colder. "Xia Yuanba, you shan't be joining the outer court. Instead, meet me in the inner hall in 3 days. Buzz, everyone felt like a million thunderbolts had just erupted beside their ears. The realm king's meaning was clear. He was going to take Xia Yuanba as his direct disciple. It was a dream most profound practitioners present at the scene didn't even dare to dream of. On the platform, Xia Yuanba slowly raised his head and said proudly, "Junior Xia Yuanba obeys the great realm king's order." High in the sky, Yun-Chi watched the whole scene while feeling all kinds of emotions. When he first entered the God realm, he too had entered the sect of a middle star realm and become the realm king's direct disciple. After Xia Yuanba returned to his space to cultivate and recuperate, Yun-Chi slipped in and appeared before him. After the initial surprise had passed, Xia Yuanba had jumped to his feet and opened his arms wide to welcome Yun-Chi with joy. However, he paused after just taking the first step, and his smile became a lot more restrained than before. "Brat, did you see everything?" Hehe, he was going to address Yun-Chi as brother-in-law until his mind caught up to his mouth. He knew that he could never call Yun-Chi that again after learning the truth. "Yuanba," Yun-Chi watched his friend with complex feelings. "I possess the best possible resources in the entire world. I can put you in any king realm of your liking. Are you sure you don't want me to do so? We talked about this. This time I wish to depend on my own strength." Xia Yuanba let out a chuckle. "I don't know where my stubbornness is coming from myself, but I just feel that I shouldn't keep relying on I mean you like when we were younger. Otherwise, one day I may not even have the right to look at your back anymore." Yun-Chi averted his gaze slightly from Xia Yuanba's smile. He didn't know that he once possessed the universe's greatest talent. Xia Yuanba revealed his connection to Yun-Chi, the Middle Realm King who declared that he would take him as his direct disciple a moment ago would have pissed his pants instantly. Yet he didn't do so. This was a new world and a new starting point. This time he would reach the height of power on his own 2 feet. "Very well," Yun-Chi answered. He would respect Xia Yuanba's choice, of course. He could also sense some sort of buried passion within his brother's eyes. The more the tyrannical emperor's divine veins awakened, the greater his desire for power and pride in his own strength became. He was certain that it wouldn't take too long before Xia Yuanba made a name for himself. "This is for you, Yuanba." Yun-Chi handed Yuanba a gemstone that shone a faint red. It was none other than the 3rd and final World Jade. "It's called a World Jade. It will teleport you to Emperor Yun City in just a few breaths no matter where you are. Make sure you wear this on your person so that you can use it immediately in case you encounter an impossible crisis." He had given the first World Jade to Yun Wuxin and the second to Jun Zile. Today, he decided that Xia Yuanba would have the 3rd and last World Jade. To have a spatial divine artifact was to have an extra life. Normally, no one would ever turn down such a valuable gift, but Xia Yuanba waved his hands without hesitation and said, "It's fine. I know firsthand just how hard it is to traverse the space of the God realm. You should save this for Wuxin instead of little old me. Also," Xia Yuanba added seriously, "if I do perish in the God realm one day, it simply means that my strength or fate wasn't sufficient. I will accept it without any regrets." This time, though, Yun Qi didn't respect Xia Yuanba's choice. He affixed the world jade to Xia Yuanba's waist with his own profound energy. "Yuanba, I know every step you take from now on will be fearless and true to yourself, but I still hope that you will cherish your own life. I would never be able to rest easy if something were to happen to you." Xia Yuanba opened his mouth, but he ultimately didn't turn down the world jade a second time. Yun Qi then said with a smile, "One more thing. Feel free to address me as brother-in-law just like before." "Ah," Xia Yuanba's reaction was greater than all the other reactions he had displayed up until this point. "Ah, really? Does that mean you don't hate my sis as much as before, brother-in-law?" "Hate?" Yun Qi looked away again and let out a bitter chuckle. "I don't have the right to hate her. I will never have the right to hate her." Xia Yuanba didn't understand what Yun Qi was saying at all. He had learned the truth of everything during his stay in the God realm. After all, there was practically no one who hadn't heard the name Xia Qingyu. He learned that his sister had been the moon god emperor, that she had attempted to slay Yun Qi with her own hands more than once, and that she went so far as to destroy the blue pole star. Of course, he also learned that Yun Qi was the one who had ultimately ended her life. The reason he didn't address Yun Qi as brother-in-law today wasn't because he was feeling reluctant, or because he resented him for the murder of his sister. Not at all. It was because he thought of all of the torture Yun Qi had gone through for the past couple years, and believed that he simply didn't have the right to call him his brother-in-law anymore. What she left behind wasn't hatred, but a debt I can never, ever repay. There were too many things he couldn't say without spilling the beans completely, so he simply patted Xia Yuanba on the shoulder and said, "No matter what you do, always remember to treat yourself well, Yuanba. Remember, you don't owe anyone anything, but this world owes everything to you." Yun Qi left after saying that. For a long time, Xia Yuanba stood where he was dazed, confused, and with a sense of relief that filled his ferocious eyes with tears. Yun Qi hadn't explained everything, but he had said enough for Xia Yuanba to know that his older sister wasn't the cruel and merciless villain everyone claimed she was. The heavy burden and guilt that had been sitting in his heart evaporated into nothing. Profound sky continent, floating cloud city. It was a peaceful early morning as usual at the Xiao residence. Xiao Lingxi was folding some clothes in silence. The clothes were old, and some of them were damaged. However, not a speck of dust could be spotted on the fabric. Yun Qi had worn these clothes when he was younger. Obviously, Yun Qi had outgrown them a long time ago, but Xiao Lingxi could never throw them away. In fact, she often took them out of the closet and tidied them. It was because the Yun Qi who wore them was hers and only hers. Today, he stood at the peak of the world as Emperor Yun, a being who neither needed her protection nor was able to keep her company all the time like before. Since he took Yun Wuxin to the God realm, it had almost been a year since they saw each other. Suddenly, she paused what she was doing and looked behind her. Their Yun Qi was watching her with deep love in his eyes from the entrance. For all she knew, he could have been standing there for a very long time. "Little Qi," that was all she managed to say before he strode up to her and pressed her head gently against his chest. "Ah!" Xiao Lingxi let out a small yelp of surprise before relaxing into the embrace. While wrapping her arms around his back, she asked, "You're back. Has your trip around the God realm with Wuxin come to an end?" "Not yet," Yun Qi replied. He closed his eyes while hugging her tightly. "Hey, did something happen during your journey?" Xiao Lingxi asked concernedly. Yun Qi shook his head. "No, I just suddenly missed you, so I came back to see you." Xiao Ling responded softly without asking any questions. The world truly was an unexpected place. You could never guess what kind of pleasant surprise it might give you at any moment. Who would have thought that the woman in his arms, his little aunt and childhood friend, would be the incarnation of the ancestral god herself? Who would have thought that the ancestral god would go so far as to severely damage her own body just to make his life better? This might very well be the single most ridiculous thing to have ever happened since the creation of the primal chaos. He felt that there were no words he could say that would fit this moment. He could only hold her tighter and tighter still. Now that the ancestral will had fallen into slumber, she would neither have those dreams nor learn that she was really the ancestral god anymore. She would only be Xianxia and Xianxia only. When the ancestral god completed this cycle of life, she would merge with the ancestral will and prepare to enter the next cycle. Her memories as Xianxia might become as insignificant as a slightly bigger speck of dust in the universe. She would never treat him as she did before. As for him, there would be no reincarnation for him. When he reached the end of his life, he would disappear entirely from this universe just like everyone else. It was stated in the ancient records of the dragon gods that reincarnation no longer existed in this world because the well of samsara had been destroyed. After the era of gods came to an end, there was even less hope to restore the cycle of reincarnation. His own reincarnation was a special case that the ancestral god had forcefully driven via the mirror of samsara. Now that the ancestral will had returned to sleep, it obviously wouldn't happen another time. In that case, there was only one thing he could do. He would give the ancestral god, no, his Xinxia, the best memories he could provide in this lifetime. Another year passed by in the blink of an eye. The biggest news of this year was without a doubt Emperor Yun's crowning of not one, but two empresses. Kai Waya was named the Devil Empress, and the late Xia Qingyu, the Divine Empress. He also ordered a temporary halt to the construction of his Emperor Yun realm, and shifted the entire God realm's resources and manpower into rebuilding the Moon God realm instead. There was no official announcement or explanation as to why the decisions were made. Naturally, it triggered countless rumors and speculation. For the Moon Gods and Moon God divine envoys, this particular year felt like a dream they couldn't wake up from. For years, they had believed that their hiding would eventually end in murderous pursuit and subsequent execution at the hands of Emperor Yun. Instead, he had personally invited back to the God realm, posthumously crowned their late God Emperor as the Divine Empress, and literally poured every available resource and manpower into rebuilding the Moon God realm. In fact, Yun Qi had personally chosen the best star realm for them before the construction began. The construction speed and the amount of manpower and resources invested into it far exceeded even the Moon God's imaginations. A year was still too short a time to restore Divine Moon City to its former glory, but it certainly wouldn't take much longer. Throughout the year, Yun Qi spent nearly half his time simply watching the new Moon God realm slowly rebuilding itself into the shape in his memories. God realm of absolute beginning, the Abyss of Nothingness. Ding, space itself snapped, but it only caused an instantaneous soft ring. Xuanyin slowly turned around. She hadn't unsheathed the nameless sword, but endless nameless sword energy filled the space within 50 kilometers of her. Her profound strength had barely improved during the years she spent in the God realm of absolute beginning, but her mastery of sword auras had entered a completely different realm. When Zhen Wuming saw his disciple shattering space itself without leaving a single trace behind, a proud smile clung to his face for a long time. His complexion was reddened, and his eyes were clear. He actually looked even younger than he was last year. Xuanyin landed in front of her master and said, I finally reached that realm you spoke of for real, master. He. Zhen Wuming said after a chuckle, it only took you 3,000 or so years to reach this realm, which is so much better than your master back then. Layer, it is the greatest fortune in my life to have you as my disciple. No, master, it is my greatest fortune to have met you, said Xuanyin while kowtowing before Zhen Wuming. I keep saying this, but I truly have no regrets left in this life. I can only offer the heavens a million thanks for giving me the time to see this with my own eyes. A pause later, he continued without losing his smile. Now, it is time we finally bid each other goodbye. Xuanyin immediately looked up with tears in her eyes. Master, Zhen Wuming raised both of his arms. Not only did his skin look as good as new, they were covered by some sort of crystalline light. The next moment, the sword he devoted his whole life into honing began pouring out of his body. He seemed to know that he was about to fade away from this world. There is no need to be sad, Layer. Your master shall be departing this world with no regrets. Zhen Wuming said smilingly, Thank you for keeping this dying old man company for the past few years. When I am gone, you will finally be able to seek out the life you wish for. Pursue it like you pursue the sword, Layer. Be sure to burn bright and persistent so as not to leave any regrets in your own life. Xuanyin could barely form words at this point. This disciple shall obey her master's teachings. It was at this moment a gust of wind brushed against them. It was an impossible phenomenon considering that they were at the edge of the Abyss of Nothingness. However, Xia was too mired in sorrow to notice it. The unusual wind didn't fade away, however. It kept growing stronger and stronger until space itself started shaking violently. Xia finally snapped out of her sorrow and looked up in confusion. Her lightning and sword-filled eyes saw thin spatial cracks appearing everywhere. Jun Wuming's peaceful expression changed into worry as well. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The unnatural spatial distortion only lasted a couple of breaths. Instead of subsiding, it was followed by a terrible spatial explosion. How was this possible? This was the God realm of absolute beginning, the space next to the abyss of nothingness. Their vision distorted, but it wasn't because their eyes suddenly decided to stop functioning properly. It was the spatial cracks suddenly spreading at an uncontrollable rate. A phenomenon like this normally happened only when god emperors were battling one another. It was at this moment that Xia finally realized that the sudden change had begun from the last place she expected, the abyss of nothingness itself. "Fly!" Jun Wuming cried in warning. Xia snapped out of her daze, carried Jun Wuming with her and zipped toward the distance at high speed. However, the spatial collapse kept growing more and more intense, and the tidal wave that seemed capable of devouring anything and everything in its way was right behind them. They flew for another 5 kilometers or so before another explosion occurred behind them. Finally, the cracked space shattered completely, and everything within it was ground into a million tiny pieces. The sudden spatial disaster finally seemed to have come to a stop. The spatial explosions and ensuing turmoil swiftly died down as well. Still in shock, Xia slowed down and looked behind her. She saw a strange, profound light shooting into the sky and piercing the grayish-white sky of the god realm of absolute beginning. The light itself was strange enough, but even stranger was the fact that it originated from the abyss of nothingness that was supposed to turn everything to nothingness. "What is that?" Xia muttered unconsciously. Jun Wuming slowly turned around as well. However, his eyes were set not on the profound light, but the thick dust and still shuddering space around the abyss of nothingness. The dust gradually settled, and visibility improved. A couple of shadows slowly rose to their feet. "Where?" A hoarse, middle-aged man's voice mixed with a bit of pain and trepidation resounded. "Where is this?" "Heh heh," a different man chuckled. "I didn't think we would live through that, but it was still a failure, damn it. When will we be rid of this damned abyssal dust? Huh." The voice halted, and all of the figures froze as if time itself had stopped. Then they started shivering and shouting on top of their lungs. It's not abyssal dust. Not abyssal dust, not abyssal dust." The sudden shouts actually caused Xia to black out for an instant. Her ears went deaf instantly, and her innards churned to the point where she felt like throwing up blood. "Rumble!" The person standing at the forefront waved his arm and scattered the dust around his group, instantly revealing 7 people. All 7 people were unfamiliar faces. They were all carrying varying degrees of injuries, but instead of pain, they wore expressions of utmost joy and excitement. As for their auras, Jun Wuming was literally moments away from the end of his life. Soon, his very thoughts would evaporate into nothing. Right now, though, his pupils were fully constricted. He looked like he was enduring the greatest shock yet of his 50,000 years of life. "We succeeded, we succeeded. There is no abyssal dust here, no abyssal dust. Ha 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 ha, ha. Again, the mad laughter shook Xia violently and threatened to drop her from the sky. Leave now," Jun Wuming urged with a trembling voice, but Zile's soul was too shaken to hear her master. Literally, in fact, her soul wasn't the only thing that was shaking. The world itself was shaking slightly. An aura of uneasiness gradually enveloped the entire god realm of absolute beginning. "Sir Knight, we should transmit our will now before the passage is closed. We need to let the priests know that we've succeeded." The Sir Knight was a tall and brawny man clad in gray-colored soft armor. His eyes were deeply sunken, but the chilly glint in his eyes could only be described as terrifying. Unlike the others, he was barely injured at all. "HMPH, I don't need you to remind me that," said the man while scanning his surroundings slowly. His perfectly controlled speech and expression betrayed a terrifyingly cold and steely determination. "I have already transmitted my will. The passage is probably about to close right about." Rumble, the white light that penetrated the abyss and the gray sky abruptly crumbled, and the abyss of nothingness finally returned to its usual silence. On the surface, it looked as vast and bottomless as before. The passage's disappearance failed to impact the stranger's overwhelming excitement in the slightest, however. Xiaming, how are your injuries?" the man in silver armor asked. The two men he called immediately moved behind him and answered, "It is nothing considering that we've breached the abyss. If the records didn't lie, this place is most likely the god realm of absolute beginning." The man in silver armor raised his arms as if he was attempting to embrace the whole new world. A world without abyssal dust. How we have longed for this day. Today marks the beginning of a whole new era, and everyone standing here will be forever remembered as its pioneers. In the future, our names shall be recorded in the books for eternity. Even better, it looks like this world really is as fragile as those outsiders claimed. When he curled his fingers a little and did a small cutting motion. Incredibly, the space in front of it split in half almost as if it was made of paper. A fragile space, fragile laws, and fragile beings. He abruptly glanced in Jun Zile and Jun Wuming's direction. In that moment, an impossibly tremendous pressure pressed down on the shocked Jun Zile. It was heavier than any pressure she had ever encountered, greater than what should be possible considering the limits of the current universe. It instantly filled her expression with pain and dropped her to her knees. She was a middle-stage divine master and a master of the way of the sword. Not even Yun Qi at his full strength could suppress her to this extent with just his aura. She felt as if the entire world was pressing down on her body. She felt as humble as an ant that was facing a mountain of unfathomable height. She couldn't summon even a shred of her willpower, much less resistance. Jun Zile was a middle-stage divine master and a disciple of the sword sovereign. Who could believe or even imagine that there existed a power in this world that could humble her so? Speaking of Jun Wuming, he was able to remain standing despite the heavy pressure on his body. However, the price of his pride was his bones popping and breaking with each passing instant. Divine Master Realm? The man named Xia narrowed his eyes a little. According to the outsider, those who ventured deep into the god realm of absolute beginning are basically the highest existences of this world. This does seem to be the case. Jun Zile didn't understand what they were talking about. She was trying to gather her profound energy and sword will through sheer unrelenting will, but all the marrow in her bones was quaking with uncontrollable fear. Who are these people? This power roar suddenly, an imposing and soul-stunning roar rang from the distance. The gray sky darkened slightly, and a gigantic dragon with wings large enough to blot out a large majority of the sky itself appeared. It looked down on the 7 figures standing in front of the Abyss of Nothingness. Who dares bring harm to the god realm of absolute beginning? The deafening commotion, the collapsing space, and the extremely unusual auras had fully alarmed the king of the god realm of absolute beginning, the dragon emperor of absolute beginning. As a result, it had come to investigate the commotion. Its body was huge, and its pressure as great as the heaven itself. However, not a single one of the strangers looked surprised by its appearance at all. As if he was delivering a heavenly mandate, the man in silver armor slowly raised his arm and spoke in an indifferent but prideful voice. "My name is Mo Baiken, and I am an abyssal knight who serves the abyssal monarch and his priests. I am also one of the pioneers who breached the abyss. The 3 of you have been blessed with the fortune to become the first to the summons of the abyss. Very fortunate indeed. Starting now, this world shall fall under the abyss jurisdiction. As the denizens of this universe, you have but 2 choices. You either submit to the abyss or die." Mo Baiken was a name no one had ever heard before. There had never been a supreme expert with the surname Mo inside or outside the god realm of absolute beginning. The abyss, the dragon emperor of absolute beginning, mouthed the words slowly. It had lived for a very, very long time, but it had never felt such a strange and ominous aura before. No power was in effect, but the space wouldn't stop shaking. It was as if the world itself was trembling in fear of something. The normally tranquil and peaceful atmosphere of the god realm of absolute beginning had now changed into something more sinister. The Dragon Emperor slowly touched all 7 people with his spiritual perception. The 4 profound practitioners at the back were covered in wounds and looked as if they had just survived a close brush with death. But the profound energy they emanated was still powerful enough to stun the entire god realm. Despite their injuries, the pressure they emanated was equal to Long Bai in his prime. Long Bai was strong because he was a dragon who inherited the thin blood of the dragon god. His upper limit naturally transcended all other races. However, these 4 men were just humans. There was only one such human in the current universe, and he was the untouchable Emperor Yun. Now, 4 such people had sprouted out of seemingly nowhere. As for the two people standing before them, its draconic soul couldn't sense anything. Its draconic soul was halted as if it had encountered an impenetrable barrier. Finally, standing at the forefront was the silver-armored man who called himself Mobiken. The moment its soul made contact with his aura, it immediately jerked away the way you would imagine a lowly insect that accidentally made contact with a heaven-devouring python would. The probing couldn't have taken more than a couple of breaths, but it filled the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning from so much shock that it could barely keep its soul together. "Are you outsiders?" The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning glanced at the Abyss of Nothingness and arrived at a conclusion immediately. It then said the only words it could say, "This is not the world you belong to. Return whence you came from, and this world shall remember your peaceful choice." "Heh heh, ha 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 ha," Mobiken laughed. It wasn't a deafening, mad laughter like before, but it was one that pierced every corner of the god realm of Absolute Beginning and awakened countless slumbering creatures. "Outsiders, on the contrary, we are travelers who finally returned home after a long, long journey." He spread his arms wide again and repeated the same embracing motion from before. His expression was one of drunkenness and a pinch of indescribable pain. "A world without abyssal dust is such a pure and peaceful world." Whoosh, a gust of wind blew, and Mobiken's voice suddenly became much harsher and more violent than before. "This world should have belonged to us. Do you have any idea how much pain and suffering we had to endure to make it back? You people who got to enjoy a world without abyssal dust, you dare to address us as outsiders." "Ha ha 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 ha." Each word sounded like a thunderclap loud enough to shatter one's soul. It shook Jun Wuming greatly, but he remained proudly standing. He glanced sideways and looked at the crimson jadestone Yun Qi had personally affixed to Jun Zilei's waist. He moved his finger slightly, but was unable to unleash even a wisp of sword energy. Meanwhile, the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning was swaying uncontrollably like it had been struck by a typhoon. Unable to maintain its calm and dignity any longer, it asked, "Who are you? Where do you come from? What are you planning to do?" "So noisy." Mobiken looked up. "This is a world that is unable to birth gods, and Divine Master Realm is your absolute ceiling. If I have to guess, you are probably its Supreme Emperor, aren't you? Hey heh. It is about time your era is coming to an end. Starting now, the Abyss shall be taking over this world. As for you, lowly king, allow me to grant you the honor of becoming the first sacrifice of the new era." He struck out. The world turned upside down, and space itself split like the sea. Roar! A terrible roar filled the air instantly. The man's power actually twisted the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning's powerful body into an indescribable shape and spilled its blood like a downpour. Even worse was the sound of its bones snapping loud enough to surpass the thunderclap of a profound thunder of the 9 heavens. Dragon scales scattered everywhere, and the Dragon Emperor's grayish body was quickly dyed red. Somehow, it was able to struggle out of the spatial vortex it had been struck with. But instead of running away, it charged straight toward the 7 figures that were many times smaller than it was, but scarier than even the Abyss of Nothingness itself. "You will resist." Mobiken's lips curled into a pitying, scornful sneer. "O pitiful mortals, how could you have forgotten the true scales of the gods? Be eternally buried in God's favor." 1. Mobiken's outstretched palm clenched. It felt like the space of the entire world was being torn and compressed. The grayish sky above their heads collapsed completely. The terrifying power that utterly defied common sense riddled the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning's gigantic body in wounds in just an instant. Only a couple of breaths had passed, but it was already injured worse than it was during the War of the Western Divine Region. Equally, it knew that there was no escaping the mire of death it had sunk into. After all, the power ravaging its body now was something that didn't belong to the current universe. ROAR. It was the most stunning and mournful roar it had unleashed up until this point. It was ordering all dragons of Absolute Beginning to stay away from this place, and warning all the denizens of the god realm of Absolute Beginning of the calamity's arrival. At the same time, it continued to gather all its power to mount one last resistance against the foreign threat. 50 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 300 meters, the further it traveled, the more its body was broken down layer by layer. Inevitably, its final descent grew more and more powerless as well. When it was about 30 meters away from Mobiken, it broke into several large parts, scattered into countless smaller pieces, and finally fell. Never again would the roar of a Dragon Emperor be heard in the god realm of Absolute Beginning. In the end, The final resistance of a proud, mighty dragon was unable to make contact with the vicious shadow of the abyss. During the war against the Western Divine region, it had suffered a terrible blow from Long Bai and was forced to battle against the dragon gods afterward. It hadn't fallen then. After Long Bai died, the title of the strongest dragon of the current universe rested on its shoulders. But today, it died without being able to touch its killer. Rumble. The sand as far as 5,000 kilometers away was kicked up when the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning's corpse hit the ground. However, it only managed to blow up Mobiken's hair and clothes. Mobiken lowered his arm leisurely and let out a HMPH. Its willpower is strong, but it simply isn't the right choice to be our dog. A dragon's natural pride will always get in the way. Before His Majesty arrives, we must shred. Suddenly, a shredding noise interrupted Mobiken and even rocked his body for an instant. He immediately looked toward the source. An incredibly sharp aura had cut through the pressure he had applied on the duo, releasing them temporarily. The sudden release caused Junzile to hit the ground heavily. At the same time, a sword beam struck the world jade on her waist, shattering it and causing it to flash crimson. Mobiken's pupils shook. He couldn't seem to believe that there existed someone in this universe who could tear through his suppression by force. However, he reacted immediately by flipping his palm over. The hole was instantly filled up, and a great pressure pressed down on the duo once more. Junzile let out a muffled groan as 10,000 mountains pressed down on her once more. This time, though, she was able to grit her teeth and turn to look at her master. Her eyes were filled with infinite fear and sorrow. Jun Wuming remained upright and unyielding even though the pressure had become several times stronger than before. He refused to bend his knees even until the very end. His white hair danced slowly as a sheen of white light enveloped his body. Every strand of white light was made up of tens of thousands of sword auras. Countless swords danced within his old eyes as well. Sword, termination, the two words that incited disbelief and despair appeared in Junzile's thoughts and eyes. She would never forget this scene for as long as she lived. Another calamity has risen. This era sure is a tumultuous one. Jun Wuming's warm and gentle voice rang beside her ears. Live well no matter how rough the road ahead of you may be, Layer. Shred Jun Wuming's body blurred, and his hair, his flesh, his blood, his bone, his will, and even his soul transformed into what seemed to be an endless amount of swords. It drilled countless holes in Mobiken's aura, drove the man backward, and caused his expression to change for the first time. Meanwhile, the crimson divine light of the world jade had enveloped Junzile completely. Her lips parted, but she vanished before she could say a single word. Mobiken's gaze flickered. He instantly cut through space and appeared where Junzile had been a moment ago, but what he discovered caused his brow to furrow into a deep frown. He didn't think that an instant would be enough time for his prey to elude him completely. In fact, there was barely any sign that a spatial teleportation had been completed at all. All around him, countless swords were mingling together and forming a vast and fantastical sword formation. They were dancing and fading slowly into the world around them. It was a dreamlike scenery the sword sovereign had left behind in his final moments. It was unfortunate that no one of the current universe could witness it. How is it, Sir Knight? The two men named Zheguang and Zheaming caught up to Mobiken asked in a low tone after noticing the look of displeasure on his face. Mobiken shook his hand once before replying, That old man somehow pierced my force field, and the spatial power that teleported that girl away was a little odd. I am unable to find any trace of a teleportation at all. HMPH. It looks like the people of this world aren't completely useless after all. Hee, Nan Zheaming chuckled. They could have had the unparalleled honor to become the first guides of the Abyss, but instead they chose death. What foolishness! Mobiken faced toward his 6 men and ordered, Seek out the exit of this world. It should lead to a place called the God Realm. The God Realm is our true homeland, and it will be our new world in the future. As pages and squires, you should already understand just how great a responsibility and honor is resting upon your shoulders right now. Eyes burning like the sun, he abruptly spread his arms and growled, Clear out all the obstacles and control the realms. We shall make this world submit before His Majesty graces it with his presence. 2. In a hall in the lower levels of Emperor Yun City, Keijai was slumped on the ground and panting heavily. She had fought at her full strength for 6 whole hours and was completely exhausted as a result of it. However, her opponent, Yun Qi, looked like he hadn't even finished his warm-up. He sat down next to Keijai and shot her an encouraging smile. As expected of my Keijai, the power of your sword is growing stronger and stronger. My bones felt like they were going to be knocked apart. 3 Keijai side-eyed him once before snorting. I highly doubt that. Your bones are even thicker than your face. Yun-Chi touched his own face with mock seriousness before asking, There is no one left in this world whom you must deal with personally, so why are you cultivating so hard? Keijai? Surprise flashed across Keijai's features before she answered, I just want to reach my late older brother's level, I guess. Yun-Chi pondered for a moment before replying, I think you've already surpassed your older brother, though. Well, it's still not enough. Keijai narrowed her eyes and said angrily, until there comes a day where I can beat up that Xianxia woman with my own hands. HMPH. Yun-Chi burst out in laughter before shaking his head. I knew it. Recently, the sins Xianxia had committed back in the days had become his foremost concern. Although Keijai's killing intent toward Xianxia had subsided a lot since the war of the Western Divine Region, it didn't mean that her hatred had disappeared at all. Every time Keijai and Xianxia encountered one another, the clash between their gazes and auras was enough to turn his scalp numb. Let's continue. Keijai rose back to her feet and summoned the heavenly wolf devil sword once more. She looked forward and said very seriously, The heaven-wounding heartless sword is incredibly powerful, but it can only unleash its true power when it is piloted by explosive hatred. I need to modify it so that it may unleash the same level of power even without explosive hatred. Only then can I say that I have lived up to my late brother's power and my title as the final star god. Very well. Yun-Chi rose to his feet and stretched his hand as well. However, an unnatural shiver suddenly overtook Keijai before he could manifest the heaven-smiting devil emperor sword. The divine light in her starry pupils extinguished, and her profound energy fell completely silent as well. What's wrong? Yun-Chi frowned and asked concernedly. Keijai parted her lips and murmured in a disbelieving voice, The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning is dead. Shock appeared on Yun-Chi's features. Yan 1, Yan 2, and Yan 3 were guarding the entrance to Emperor Yun Great Hall and doing nothing in particular. Sigh. Yan 3 let out a murky breath. It's been so long since we killed someone that my bones are starting to itch. When will these boring-ass days finally come to an end? Is that so? Yan 2 said darkly. Would you prefer to be thrown back into the bone sea of eternal darkness? Yan 3 immediately withdrew his head. It was at this moment a god emperor approached the hall. He was none other than Xuanyin Emperor of the Southern Divine Region himself. When he saw the 3 Yama ancestors, he hurriedly dropped to his knees and quelled his aura. Senior Yama ancestors, Xuanyin has an urgent matter he wishes to bring up to Emperor Yun. If you... Before he could finish, Yan 3 said in a hoarse and eerie voice, Master is currently cultivating in seclusion. He won't be seeing anyone for 2 months or so. Leave. But, get out. Ah, yes, yes, yes. The devilish aura of the 3 Yama ancestors was absolutely terrifying. The rebuke alone was enough to scare the Xuanyin Emperor into silence and panicked retreat. 2 hours later, Kang Shishin descended from the sky and set foot on the Emperor Yun city. For, currently, Kang Shishin was a different man from who he used to be. The title of Chief Enforcer put him slightly higher than all God Emperors, and unlike the Xuanyin Emperor, he remained calm and collected even when facing the 3 Yama ancestors. Senior Yama ancestors, Shishin has an urgent matter that requires His Majesty's presence to resolve. Is he inside the Great Hall right now? Master is currently cultivating in seclusion. He won't be seeing anyone for 2 months or so. Leave. Yan 3 repeated in an eerie but languid voice. He was so bored he couldn't even be bothered to open his eyes. Shishin shall be taking his leave then. Goodbye. Kang Shishin turned around and left without wasting a single breath. Tui. Yan 3 spat in annoyance. I said leave, not leave immediately. We just want a punching bag and he can't even oblige us that. Yan 3 just finished saying this when the space in front of him suddenly flashed red. The next moment, a person fell from the air and landed heavily against the ground. She was none other than Jun Zile herself. For a couple of breaths, she simply knelt on the ground looking utterly soulless and lost. Then she shook as if she just woke up from a nightmare, looked up and saw the 3 incredibly recognizable Yama ancestors. Tears sliding profusely down her cheeks, she rose to her feet and made a mad dash for the trio. However, she was so out of sorts that she tripped and fell to the ground once more. Before she could even climb back to her feet, she shouted in a sobbing voice, Where is Yun-Chi? Where is Yun-Chi? I need to see him now. The audacity! The sleepy Yan 3 instantly opened his eyes and rebuked her. Who are you to call my master by his name, you BR? Before he could finish his sentence, though, someone's foot kicked him in his ass and shoved his remaining words back into his stomach. Yan 1 scolded Yan 3 after sending Yan 3 sailing into the air. Are you blind? She's a woman. That snapped Yan 3 out of his drowsiness completely. He hurriedly put a tight lid on the dirty words that were a moment away from escaping his throat. The woman wasn't Yun Chi's consort, but she was given the power to teleport directly to Emperor Yun City. She obviously couldn't be a generic woman. Little girl, Yan 2 started with what he thought was a friendly expression. Master is cultivating in seclusion right now. He cannot be disturbed for some time. How about you visit him at another date? And no, Junzile moved forward and shook her head hard. I need to see him immediately. Where is he? Where is he? Yun Chi Yunche? 1. What if they were too weakened to shatter the jade? 2. Assuming every one of them is divine extinction realm, it'll still take ages for 7 people to just spread the word, much less control them. 3. Zile was anyone else, the 3 Yama ancestors would have taken turns putting a foot to her ass and launching her into orbit. Still, she was Jun Zile, so they could only block her path with the utmost delicacy and care. Just because they were His Majesty's faithful slaves did not mean they were suckers for punishment. Little Sword Sovereign? Yan 1 was about to say something when Keijai's voice came from behind his back. Yun Chi's presence had entered his perception as well. The 3 Yama ancestors, relaxed like a heavy burden, had been lifted off their shoulders upon their arrival. They hurriedly let go of Jun Zile as well. When Jun Zile saw Yun Chi, the control she had barely been clinging to immediately fell apart. Staggering toward him and seizing his shirt with icy hands, she cried, "Flee, Yun Chi! You need to flee now. The enemy is too great, and you are the only one who mustn't die no matter what." Yun Chi's confused expression immediately morphed into a deep frown. Considering Yun Chi's current strength and everything he had at his command, he could not even find a threat that was worthy of his attention, much less one that could take his life. When Keijai had sensed the sudden death of the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning, he had decided to end their secluded cultivation early and find out what was going on. However, they were met with an utterly distraught Jun Zile the second they stepped out of their chamber. Her panicked gaze, confused aura, and seemingly insane ramblings were all transforming his doubt into deep worry. He placed both hands on Jun Zile's shoulders and looked her in the eyes. Then he said slowly, "What happened? Take your time." However, not even Yun Chi's aura was enough to quell the chaos clawing at Jun Zile's heart and soul completely. She answered in a disjointed, stammering voice, "The denizens of the Abyss of Nothingness killed the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning and Master. She started sobbing uncontrollably. Up until this point, her emotions were mostly dominated by shock and sheer terror. It was only now that the sadness rose up to her throat and turned her into a sobbing mess. Despite her endless tears, she was still the little sword sovereign. She strangled her sobs and bowed her head before Yun Chi. "Look at my memories." She opened up her soul to Yun Chi completely. Part of the reason she did it was because she was saddened beyond the point of caring, but it was mostly because she trusted him from the bottom of her heart. "How did you find out about the death of the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning?" snapped Keijai while taking a step forward. Before she could do anything, though, Yun Chi stopped her with a raised hand before tightening his grip on Jun Zile's shoulder. Then, he gently slipped a wisp of soul energy into her defenseless soul. Her memories for the past 15 minutes flashed across Yun Chi's consciousness. There was a moment of silence, and his aura suddenly withdrew unto itself like a soundless black hole. His pupils shrank little by little, and his features warped into a dark expression no one had seen since the battle against the Western Divine Region. "What's going on? Tell me," Keijai demanded. Yun Chi's transformation was so drastic she felt like an invisible hand had grasped her heart. Instead of answering, Yun Chi touched her forehead with a finger and shared with her the memories he had gotten from Jun Zile. An instant later, Keijai's aura too withdrew unto itself with utter shock and disbelief. The casual suppression of the sword sovereign duo, the easy murder of the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning, unfamiliar people, unfamiliar sights, unfamiliar words, and unfamiliar powers. Yun Chi and Keijai were among the greatest powers in the universe right now. They were well aware of its absolute ceiling. That was why they knew the powers they saw in Jun Zile far exceeded the limits of the current world. It was a terrifying power that should not exist in this world at all. So shocked was Keijai that her body was trembling slightly. It wasn't just the collapse of common sense that racked her. but also the realization that Yun Qi's rule had gone from absolutely unshakable to potentially destroyed in a single day. How can this, how? She murmured dazedly to herself. Who are these people? The Abyss. Yun Qi clenched his fists as he set his gaze where the god realm of absolute beginning would be. The sudden death of the Dragon Emperor of absolute beginning was shocking, but he never imagined that it was caused by never-before-seen powers he didn't know existed. Until now. Abyss passage, abyssal dust, abyssal monarch, knights, pioneers of a new era, true scales of the gods. Each time the fragments of Jun Zilei's memories struck against his soul, he felt like cracks were spreading across the heavens. Flee, flee, still clinging to Yun Qi with a death grip, Jun Zilei begged. Flee to a place where no one can find you. These people are monsters. We cannot defeat them. You are the only one who must live, for you are our hope, our future. Her soul was half-shredded by panic, fear, and shock, but she wasn't so distraught that she missed the threat those monsters in human skin posed to their universe. For a long time, Yun Qi simply stared forward and said nothing at all. The three Yama ancestors did not even dare to take a deep breath throughout the eerie and oppressive silence. Finally, Yun Qi gently pushed Jun Zilei to the side before summoning a sound transmission profound formation. Then he ordered in a calm yet heavy voice, Meiyin, I want you to bring the Devil Queen, Xuanyin, Kaianian, Kang Shishan, Qi Tianli, the Blue Dragon. He paused for a second before continuing. I changed my mind. Bring only the Devil Queen to Emperor Yun City now. We cannot afford to waste the World Piercer's power. The sound transmission ended there. Shui Meiyin never asked him what had happened or why. His grave tone and urgent command were all she needed to hear to understand the severity of the situation. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. There was a crimson flash, and Shui Meiyin and Kai Waiao appeared right in front of him. What's going on? Kai Waiao sensed something was amiss the instant she appeared in Emperor Yun City. The darkness on Yun Qi and Keijai's faces was something she had not seen since the warring days. Our short peace has come to an end, Yun Qi said forebodingly before sharing Jun Zilei's memories with Kai Waiao and Shui Meiyin. Emotion was a very curious thing. For example, when someone had suffered a shock that surpassed their bearable limits, the person would blank out as if their mind had temporarily shut down to protect themselves. That was the case for Kai Waiao right now. For the first time in her life, she was so still that her aura and soul were frozen like ice. Devil Queen, Yun Qi started, I would like to hear your opinion. It was only then that Kai Waiao snapped back to reality. She slowly closed her eyes and fell silent for a long time. Objectively speaking, the memory was short and not complicated at all. But its contents, this was the first time she, the owner of the Nirvana Devil Emperor's soul, had to take so long to process her shock. Abyss of Nothingness, Shui Meiyin whispered. They really came out of the abyss, but how? It's an abyss that turns everything into nothing, right? Were the records mistaken all this time? Was there a whole world lying on the other side of the abyss? No, the records are correct, said Yun Qi gravely. A year ago I spoke with the ancestral god's will. Kai Waiao's eyes opened in shock. Shui Meiyin, Jun Zilei, and Keijai were staring at him like he had grown a second head as well. It was no wonder they were acting like this. The ancestral god was literally the highest existence in the universe after all. Although he had sworn to bring this secret to the grave, the situation did not allow for that luxury anymore. According to her, the primal chaos we live in is but one half of the true primal chaos. A long time ago, she separated the two primal elements of primal chaos, existence and extinction, in order to create a world full of life. The world we live in is called the world of existence, and the abyss the world of extinction. In the records, the power that turns everything into nothing is really the primal power of extinction, and the god realm of absolute beginning is the bridge between the two worlds. The two worlds should have existed in a state of perpetual balance, but during the final stages of the war between the gods and the devils, the lingering will of the ancestral god accidentally discovered that something was off with the primal chaos. The primordial energy of the universe, the spirit energy of the divine way, and the devilish aura of darkness, they were all flowing in the same direction. They were flowing into the abyss of nothingness. It was at that moment she realized the laws she had bestowed upon the abyss of nothingness had become damaged and useless. The reason was twofold. 1, it had been too long since she renewed the laws on the abyss of nothingness. 2, the war between the gods and the devils had inflicted a flaw upon the laws, which drastically accelerated its deterioration. In the end, not even the ancestral will was able to see through the abyss of nothingness and into the other world. Xuanyin said in a tiny voice, "So you're saying that the Abyss of Nothingness became abnormal as soon as it broke free from the shackles of the ancestral gods' laws. Instead of a world where only destruction exists, it turned into a universe with its own unique sets of laws." That wasn't something Xianxia could answer. After all, not even the Ancestral Will herself knew what had happened to the Abyss of Nothingness. Her worry had been the energy of extinction annihilating the world of existence in one unstoppable, catastrophic reaction. It was why she had chosen to go through 1,000 samsaras and reincarnate back to the living. It was an existential threat that had been sitting in a corner of Xianxia's mind since he learned of it. But there was no way he could have predicted that it would appear so soon. Not only that, instead of an unstoppable tsunami of energy that returned everything into nothing, the Abyss had spat out 7 monsters in human skin instead. Now is not the time for a history lesson, intriguing as it may be. What matters is how we're going to deal with this crisis. Xiaobai finally spoke up and drew everyone's attention. The black light in her eyes was the deepest it had ever been to date. Outsiders aren't inherently scary. What's scary is that they possess power no one in this universe can measure up to. She emphasized, as if afraid that someone would underestimate their opponent. To immobilize the Sword Sovereign with just their aura, and slay the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning in just a few breaths. Our enemies aren't nigh invincible. They are literally impossible to fight against as we are. As if that isn't bad enough, these outsiders hate our world with a passion. Finally, she let out a heavy, oppressive sigh. A world beyond a world? How absurd! It was absurd. It was as illogical and sudden, like a dream, but unlike a dream, it was very real and most deadly for the entire universe. At the back, the 3 Yama ancestors were exchanging incredulous looks with one another. The slave imprint made them eternally loyal to Xianxia, but it did not damage their knowledge of the world. However, they never knew there existed another universe, and so close too, despite having lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Hatred! Xianxia recalled Junzilei's memory again. It was true that the leader of the group was dominated not just by excitement and joy, but also terrifying hatred. The way he butchered the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning was proof of that. Are they here to destroy the world then? Xuanyin asked. No, Xiaobai shook her head. You heard what they said. They wish to become the conquerors, not the destroyers. That is why kept the Sword Sovereigns alive despite having slain the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning. They were looking to vent, yes, but what they wanted even more was a guide that would hasten their progress. The abyssal monarch, she thought to herself. The words hammered against her consciousness and stifled her breath. The 7 invaders currently loose in their world were scary enough, but the thought that they were just the pioneers scared her even more. She could tell how much those invaders respected and feared the abyssal monarch from their tone alone. Whoever this person was, she was certain that they were absolutely untouchable. Xuanyi's eyes were uncannily dark and lightless. She said in a quiet voice, "It doesn't matter to us whether they're here to conquer or destroy. The rest of the world can choose to bend their knees, but the ruler will most certainly be." She looked at Xianxia and grabbed his sleeve tightly. "The little Sword Sovereign is right, big brother Xianxia. We must hide for the time being. We believe there is nothing and no one you cannot overcome, but that time has not yet arrived. For now, we must hide." Xuanyin was correct. Anyone could bow to the enemy and live, but there could only be one fate for a ruler execution. Hide was about the most tactful word Xuanyin could think of describing their solution. Flee, flee. You mustn't let your emotions affect your decision. Junzilei cried out again. Her body was still trembling from sorrow and fear, but she was perfectly clear-headed. As the only person in the room who had experienced the 7 invaders' pressure, she knew better than anyone that even Xianxia was utterly powerless before those people. Xiaobai looked at Xianxia and said solemnly, "The decision is yours. I know I can't change your mind once you're set on something, but this is a matter of life or death. Please consider carefully." Unfortunately, Xianxia would not have the time to do so. Everyone's heart suddenly skipped a beat as a terrible, long groan resounded seemingly across the entire universe. Then the very space around them began trembling as if in fear. It never stopped. Xianxia, Xiaobai, Keijai, Xuanyin, Junzilei, the 3 Yama ancestors, and countless more God realm experts turned toward the same direction at the same time. It was as if they were attracted by an irresistible force. There, the God realm of Absolute Beginning lay. They're out, Junzilei muttered a bit hysterically. There was no doubt at this point. The god realm itself was shaking in fear before the 7 invaders. Kai Waiao sighed. It looks like we do not even have the time to hesitate anymore. Decide now, my emperor. Beginning resided. There was a violent distortion of space before 7 abyssal shadows crossed over the edge and appeared in the massive realm known as the God Realm, Yun Qi's dominion. God Realm, Mobaikin muttered as he slowly observed with his eyes and took in everything with his senses. The color within his eyes was fixed, so it was difficult to distinguish the emotions that were hidden behind them. On the other hand, Nan Jiaming's eyes were clearly shining with 2/3 excitement and 1/3 disdain. Is this really the home of the old gods and devils? The laws are fragile and lowly, and the auras are filthy to say the least. When the Pope examined the wheel of time of this world, they said that it has only been 1,000,000 years since the annihilation of gods and devils. Mobaikin closed his eyes as if he could not bear the sight of this realm. To think it would decline this much in just 1,000,000 years. It proves that the creatures of this world are both vile and cruel. The thought that these animals have not only plundered the gods and devils' lands and inheritances for themselves, but also lived in a realm free of abyssal dust, is heh. The sound of Nan Jiaguang's teeth fracturing under the extreme pressure they were subjected to reverberated in everyone's ears. My hatred, my disgust, they're begging to be released into the world. It was clear that his words resonated deeply with his companions, for their auras too became tainted with barely suppressed fury and violence. Mobaikin spoke up. His Majesty is a compassionate soul who has no tolerance for strife, bullying, and indiscriminate killing. It is thanks to his wisdom that the Abyss is at peace. This realm may be lowly, but it will eventually be part of His Majesty's dominion. I know of your resentment, but I am sure His Majesty would prefer to be welcomed with deference and obedience than bloody terror. Mobaikin side-eyed his companions before continuing. The Pope is also of the same mind. We are pioneers, and every word and action we take will be recorded in history. Be it for His Majesty's sake or our own, we must keep ourselves in check and focus on accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. All 6 men turned deadly serious at Mobaikin's admonishment. Nan Jiaming exhaled slightly before saying, now that the passage is formed, it should take His Majesty just 50 years to gather the power of the gods and grace this realm with His presence. 50 years is short, but in a world where divine masters are the top of the food chain, it should take us several years at most to achieve complete dominance. Hence, there should be no harm in letting loose a little. However, Mobaikin let out a cold HMPH and said, 50 years, have you forgotten about the black tide of time? Nan Jiaming furrowed his brow. Then he blanched when he recalled something. Are you saying? Mobaikin raised his hand and summoned a black wheel. Every group of pioneers is granted a time wheel from the Pope to measure the time. Look. The disc was covered in black lines that glowed a darkish light. Underneath the black lines was a time domain that operated on its own time. A small ball of light could be seen swimming rapidly inside the time domain. It looked like a firefly that was caught by a storm. 10 times, the flow of time is 10 times faster on the outside than it is inside. Nan Jiaming's expression turned serious. So we only have 5 years to do what needs to be done. The black disc disappeared as Mobaikin withdrew his palm. There is one more thing I'd like all of you to etch into your memories. Mobaikin turned toward his subordinates. His gaze was cold and piercing as he said, the Pope once said something most profound to me. We all share the same homeland as His Majesty, but the word homeland carries a completely different connotation for His Majesty than it does for us. I don't care how deep your resentment runs or how lowly the creatures of this realm are. This is His Majesty's homeland, so you will not cause undue damage to it. Understand? He could not have been clearer if he tried. There was a good chance the abyssal monarch cared about this realm more than he cared about the abyss. His harsh words finally extinguished the excitement and hostility that had gripped his 6 subordinates. Nan Jiaming and Nan Jiaguang had rapidly woken up from their bloodlust as well. We understand and thank you deeply for your warning, Sir Knight, Nan Jiaguang responded. So, what should we do now? Mobaikin turned his gaze to the west. It looks like the God realm of absolute beginning is an independent realm. If I am not mistaken, the dragon we killed earlier is only the ruler of the God realm of absolute beginning, not God realm. According to the outsiders, the God realm is ruled by the Western divine region, which in turn is ruled by the inheritors of the dragon god's bloodline, the so-called dragon god realm. Their ruler is titled the Dragon Monarch to imply that they are the one true monarch of the entire god realm. Monarch! All 6 men blanched, as if a taboo of the highest degree had just been broken. He who dares to call themselves as the one true monarch while the abyssal monarch still lives must die 1,000,000 times over. Nan Zheguang raged. Mo Baikin continued coldly, I shall head to the western divine region to deal with this monarch myself. I leave the east to the rest of you. An instant later, the man was but a dot in the distant west, but his cold, ruthless voice continued to reverberate within his subordinates' souls like he was right next to them. Remember that His Majesty seeks to rule these people, not to cleanse them. Those who bow to his will shall live, and those who do not shall die. You will not kill indiscriminately, and you will definitely not abuse the defenseless. We are pioneers, and our glory will be remembered for 1,000 generations. You will not let this supreme glory be tarnished by a fleeting impulse. Do not disappoint me. Yes, sir. All 6 men responded and bowed deeply toward the west. It wasn't until Mo Baikin's aura was completely gone that they finally straightened their backs once more. The starry space was so vast and radiant that it almost felt like an illusion. There was no life-devouring abyssal dust or black fog of residual souls anywhere to be found. This was the normal state of things for all creatures who resided in the god realm, but to Mo Baikin, it was a sight that only ever existed in his most beautiful dreams until now. He did not realize he was slowing down more and more as he flew toward the west. Even as he spread his arms wide and felt every bit of space and every wisp of aura that passed through his fingers, he still could not bring himself to believe that he was in reality. What if he did, and he suddenly woke up and found himself covered in abyssal dust once more? He might not be able to recover from the despair. It wasn't long before the western divine region was within reach, and clusters of draconic auras entered his perception. But instead of pushing forward, he came to a complete stop. His chilly gaze slowly melted into something indescribable as he stared quietly at the distant space. His shoulders trembled first, followed by his torso. Soon his entire body was shaking violently. Jenner Longer, a hoarse, raspy voice containing none of the steel from before slipped past his lips. Can you see this? It's a world without even a speck of abyssal dust. Daddy didn't lie. Daddy really did it. Can you see? If only I succeeded a few years earlier. If only, the knight sobbed uncontrollably in the empty space. The reverberations that affected the entire god realm finally stopped. For a moment, it almost seemed like everything had returned to normal. That was untrue, of course. The gloom it left behind was so heavy that it was positively suffocating. Yuanqi was, in fact, not unfamiliar with this unnatural spatial tremor. When he had sacrificed the origin power of 4-star gods to activate God Ash, when the titanic sea god cannon had unleashed its ancient power at the southern divine region, when the heaven-smiting devil emperor had made her comeback. All of his experiences told him it could only be caused by a power that terrified the heavenly way, a power that exceeded the very limits of the universe itself. It had mercilessly trampled their final sliver of optimism and ground it to dust. What do we do, big brother Yuanqi? Xuanyin asked while clutching Yuanqi's wrist with one hand and holding the world piercer with the other. The heavenly profound treasure was already shining a crimson light and ready to take effect at a moment's notice. How many more times can the world piercer perform a long-distance teleportation? Kai Wyo asked. It depends on how far we're teleporting, Xuanyin answered as quickly as she could. If it's just a short cross-star region teleportation, then it has another 20 charges or so. However, if it's a long-distance teleportation involving a large number of individuals, it could run out of divine power in a few uses at most. It went without saying that teleporting an entire planet to a different star region was no longer possible. Kai Wyo did not say anything else. She merely waited for Yuanqi to make his decision. Everyone here knew exactly what type of person Yuanqi was. They knew that he would never escape on his own. Plus, he was Emperor Yun of the God realm now. Was escape even a choice to begin with? Devil Queen, Yuanqi finally spoke up, message all divine regions to monitor the enemy's movements. If contact is made, they are not to resist no matter what. Understood. Kai Wyo bowed her head. She wasn't surprised by the order in the slightest. Besides that, there are 2 people we can no longer trust under these circumstances, added Yuanqi. Kai Wyo said slowly, Qi Tianli Kang Shishan. Qi Tianli is a man who prioritizes self-preservation above all else. He will submit to whoever is the strongest. Kang Shishan, If this crisis had never occurred, I have no doubt that he would be our most devoted dog in the universe. But now, he will surely bite the hand that feeds him. Qi Tianli and the Qilin realm was the leader of the Western Divine region right now. Kang Shishan was the chief enforcer with his teeth and claws spanning the entire God realm. Kai Wai herself had bestowed upon them their power and responsibilities. This was hardly her fault, however. Who could have predicted that this would happen now of all times? Yun Qi? Jun Zile abruptly looked up. You cannot be. Yun Qi stared calmly into her wet eyes and replied, A calamity has occurred, and you want me, the Emperor of all things, to escape without a fight. It would be a stain I could never remove for the rest of my life. My descendants and everyone I care about would suffer from my cowardice as well. No, no, no. Jun Zile denied while shaking her head strongly. Her fingers were pale white because of how strongly she was gripping Yun Qi's hand. Listen to me, Yun Qi. I could do nothing when these people killed my master right before my eyes. Trust me when I say my hatred for them is 1,000,000,000 times greater than yours. However, even my hatred is not enough to blind me to the fact that they're not someone you can confront head-on. There is no one in the universe who will blame you for fleeing from these people, not to mention that you're not really running away from them. You're just avoiding them until you've accumulated enough power to mount a counterattack. So please don't let your honor or dignity stop you from making the right decision, please. Kai Wai shot Jun Zile a glance and sighed internally. I knew it. If the situation wasn't as dire as it was, the proud and stubborn Jun Zile might never reveal such a vulnerable and emotional side to Yun Qi, much less anyone else. In stark contrast to the little sword sovereign's mental breakdown, Yun Qi looked eerily serene. He said while looking straight into Jun Zile's eyes, Calm down. Do I look like the type to commit suicide over something as stupid as my kingly dignity? These people may be scary, but I... He raised his head slightly while continuing in a chilly voice. Am not as powerless as you think I am. Worst comes to worst, we can simply escape with the World Piercer, Kai Wai said calmly. Amen. Shui Meiyin nodded her head as well. Yun Qi had made up his mind, and Kai Wai had chosen to obey his decision. There was no point in wasting her breath any longer. Furthermore, I just realized that the situation may not be as bad as we thought. Yun Qi, why do you say that? Keijai asked. Outsiders. On the contrary, we are travelers who finally returned home after a long, long journey. Kai Wai repeated the words spoken by the abyssal figure in Jun Zile's memories before continuing. Back when the gods and devils were still alive, they were so powerful that even the primal chaos at its prime wasn't able to withstand their power. Their war shattered heaven and earth, and the death of a true god was akin to a natural disaster of epic proportions, much less a greater one. That was why both races chose to punish their unforgivable sinners by dropping them into the abyss of nothingness. This way, the death of a true god would not cause undue harm to the primal chaos. If the abyss of nothingness had become abnormal since a long time ago, if it was no longer just a pure world of extinction, then it would make sense that not all of the true gods and true devils who were dropped into the abyss of nothingness have perished. At least some of them must have survived and even populated the transformed abyss with their descendants. From this, we can deduce that these people may not be native to the abyss. They were, in fact, the descendants of the sinners who were dropped into the abyss back then. In essence, the abyss is a world of extinction. Transformed it might be, there is no way it could be completely rid of the energy of extinction, and I am almost certain that it is the abyssal dust they mention time and again. From this, we can deduce that the abyss must be an extremely harsh world to live in, which is why its denizens were desperate to punch through the abyss of nothingness and escape into a world where the power of extinction did not exist. Our world, and today they have finally succeeded. These are just my guesses, of course. I believe they explain the 7 foreigners' behavior nicely, however, Kai Wai ended. The descendants of the ancient gods and devils. Kai Wai's theory caused everyone to begin recalling the strange foreigner's words. Her theory was exactly identical to Yun Qi's as well. Before the Great War, most of the persecuted true gods and true devils were dropped into the abyss of nothingness. In fact, it was clearly stated in the Dragon God's secret tome that the heaven-punishing divine emperor, Mo Yi, had personally dropped his son, Mo Su, into the abyss of nothingness. Today, multiple experts of impossible power had emerged from the abyss of nothingness, where only death and nothingness should have existed. It was impossible not to put 2 and 2 together. The abyss that had been undergoing a silent transformation all this time had finally given birth to a most horrific calamity. As if that wasn't bad enough, these 7 people were just the vanguard, a prelude to the true calamity. Assuming they really think of this place as their homeland, and/or a paradise that is free of abyssal dust, then there is a high likelihood that they will not cause undue harm or destruction to this universe. However, Kai Weiao looked at Yun-Chi, this mercy unfortunately does not extend to you. Suddenly, Yun-Chi turned a little to the side. The next second, a small, profound sound transmission formation unfolded in front of him. Xianxia Yinger's voice came from the formation. "What is that spatial anomaly, Yun-Chi? I don't know why, but it left me with an unshakable sense of oppression." "It's no big deal," Yun-Chi replied indifferently. "We just got a few uninvited visitors from the God realm of absolute beginning is all. Stay at the Brahma Monarch God realm and do not leave no matter what happens. I will be there in a moment." He extinguished the formation before Xianxia Yinger could respond. Yun-Chi lowered his arms and looked at the sky. His eyes were as cold as the abyss itself. "When I look back on life, I realize that every step I took toward heaven was paved by your blood and wounds. You brought me to the peak only to perish alone in the abyss. The very world I currently enjoy is the culmination of your life of blood, sweat, and tears. Knowing that, how could I possibly allow anyone to trample over it?" Bang, a tremendous shockwave erupted from Yun-Chi's body and kicked his black hair into the air. The entire Emperor Yun city fell as silent as death. Realm, dark clouds rolled across the sky, twisting and scattering again and again. On the ground, the Qilin Emperor observed the unnatural phenomenon while a heavy, inexplicable weight sat in his heart. He had been maintaining this posture for a very long time. The 4 Ink Qilins and the Qilin Guardians were also standing behind him. The unnatural spatial tremor shook the world, and the invisible pressure that had been constricting their breathing since a while ago had prompted them to move to their emperor's side without needing to be told. "Is there still no news from Emperor Yun, your majesty?" An Ink Qilin broke the silence with an inquiry. The Qilin Emperor shook his head and replied in a heavy voice, "That spatial tremor from before is anything but natural, and Emperor Yun should have reacted by now." "Ai," he let out a long sigh. "When an unprecedented emperor was crowned and all of primal chaos rejoiced, I thought for sure that a long and peaceful era was upon us. But this cannot be an omen of yet another disaster, can it? The new universe isn't even stable yet. There is no need to worry too much, your majesty. Perhaps it was an interdimensional storm resulting from the collapse of an ancient secret realm. And even if it is an omen of disaster, there is nothing Emperor Yun cannot deal with, right?" "I hope so," the Qilin Emperor replied a bit distractedly. He did not mention that the spatial tremor and suffocating feeling that followed had reminded him of the return of the Devil Emperor immediately. Another Ink Qilin came forward to make a report. "The 6th wave of news has arrived, your majesty. We have confirmed that the spatial tremor originated from the entrance to the God realm of absolute beginning. However, no one has found any abnormalities or unusual auras up until this point. In fact, it's strange that Emperor Yun City still had not sent us any news or orders." The Qilin dipped his head and fell silent. "Am I really overthinking things?" It was at this moment the piercing noise of something being shredded resounded from the distance. The Qilin Guardians immediately boomed in unison. "Who dares intrude into?" Shred. Before they could finish, the same noise erupted right next to their ears. It stabbed into their ears like a million blades until nothing else could be heard. The Qilin Emperor and 4 Ink Qilins were some of the most powerful existences in primal chaos, and yet they all stumbled backward and blacked out for an instant. The Qilin Emperor released his profound aura and steadied himself in an instant. When he looked up, his gaze instantly became affixed to a silver-gray figure. After the Dragon God realm was defeated, the Qilin capital had become the strongest bastion in the entire Western Divine region. Its many barriers and countless guards made it near impossible to force even a single step through. However, the silver-gray figure had ripped through space to appear before them in an instant. It was as if the powerful defense that had never been pierced for almost 1,000,000 years did not exist. It was a feat beyond the late Long Bai and even the unparalleled Emperor Yun. "Who are you?" The Ink Qilin standing at the forefront shouted, voice turning cold and severe as he recovered from his shock. Despite the fear and trepidation beating inside his chest, he hid his emotions well because he was an Ink Qilin, and the world he resided in was the Qilin God realm. He could falter in power, but never in spirit, not right away at least. No one had seen the stranger's face and attire before. In fact, they did not even recognize the power that was imbued in his rather conspicuous silver-gray armor. This was impossible, seeing as this man was anything but missable. The unfamiliar man slowly trained his gaze on the greatest powers of the Western divine region. He looked like he was observing a group of ants. HMPH? The stranger's snort sounded arrogant and full of disdain. I didn't think that this region's strongest experts would be killins instead of dragons. Then again, it has been many years since we received live outsiders. It would make sense that the intel we gathered was long outdated. His voice was arrogant to the point of being unbearable, and his words made no sense when strung together into a sentence. The stranger had not discharged his aura, but the stronger the profound practitioner, the more they could sense that an invisible yet intimidating pressure seemed to be rolling off of him like a bottomless abyss. His words especially caused waves of shock in the Qilin Emperor's heart. He sucked in a deep breath and gestured for his men not to act without permission. He then said in a calm voice, "This old one is Qi Tianli, the current leader of the Qilin race. If I may be so bold, where do you come from, and why are you here, honored guest?" The stranger had intruded into the Qilin capital and acted prouder than Emperor Yun himself, and yet the Qilin Emperor had decided to pay him a level of respect that was almost obsequious. The profound practitioners of low cultivation and/or experience could not help but gasp in shock when they saw this. "The current leader of the Qilin race?" Mobiken looked down again. "You are not the emperor of this universe. You give me far too much credit, honored guest," Qi Tianli said while he racked his brain for the right words to say. "We, the Qilin race, have always been a race who knows their place well since time immemorial. We dislike conflict, and we have never once sought to rule the universe. Right now, we are the servants of Emperor Yun, and there isn't a living creature in the God realm who doesn't know about him, or so I thought. Is it possible that you are unaware of his ascension, honored guest?" All around him, Qilins were exchanging confused glances with each other. "How is it possible that there is someone who hasn't heard of Emperor Yun yet? Is that so?" The man's response was utterly indifferent. In honesty, it did not really matter to him who was the current ruler of the God realm. Regardless of their status, they were all ants he could crush with a finger. Still looking down from above, he swept his gaze across the strongest Qilins present and declared, "Listen well. My name is Mobiken, and I am the Abyssal Knight who serves the Abyssal Monarch and the Pope, and a pioneer of the Abyss. From this day onward, this world will be taken over by the Abyss. You, the creatures of this world, have two choices." He extended his arm with his palm facing toward the ground. In that moment, it looked like he had the entire Qilin realm in his grasp. 1, you may bend your knees and submit to his majesty. 2, you may become part of the blood and soot that I will smear across this realm in preparation for his majesty's arrival. Mobiken, Abyssal Monarch, Pope. The Abyss, the unknown, struck Qi Tianli's heart again and again like a hammer, and there was nothing more terrifying in this world than the unknown. Before he could give his reply, an angry shout suddenly erupted behind him. "Ha! For a wild man, you have one of the biggest mouths I've ever seen. I don't know which rock you crawled out from, but you must be insane if you think you can call the Qilin realm to submission with just empty words. Not even a wild dog has a bark as loud as yours." "Silence, Mingji!" Qi Tianli shouted, but it was too late. He had been too stunned by the man's declaration to react in time. The speaker's name was Qi Mingji, and the reason he was present at the scene was because he was the son of the Qilin Emperor. He enjoyed the highest status of all of Qi Tianli's descendants, because he had entered the early stage of the Divine Master realm at just the young age of 1,200, which was practically a miracle for the slow-growing Qilin race. Unfortunately, he still wasn't strong enough to sense the terrifying aura coming from Mobiken like the Ink Qilins and Qilin Guardians could, and the consequence of his weakness was going to reveal itself an instant later. Qi Mingji shut his mouth immediately after his father's rebuke. Then, his body stiffened, and his pupils became a dozen times wider than before. It was because Mobiken had raised his hand and enveloped not just Qi Mingji, but the entire Qilin realm in an aura that could only be described as soul-crushing. "Heh," the man let out a low chuckle before speaking in a drastically different voice that sounded like a million mountains smashing into each other at the same time. "I applaud you. This is the exact moment when a fool should come out and tell everyone what the cost of their folly is, and you have seized the opportunity without fail." Space shook, heaven and earth trembled, and the dark clouds on the sky squirmed like dying larvae. Qi Tianli, the Ink Killins, and the rest of the divine masters turned so white that they looked more like weathered corpses than living at that moment. Qi Tianli in particular felt like his eyeballs would explode from the sheer amount of strain they were being subjected to. There were no words he knew that could possibly describe the pressure he was feeling right now. Every cell in his body was telling him that this was not a power that should exist in the world, that there was no one in the entire primal chaos who could possibly oppose this man. He who will not submit to the abyss must die. Wait, please. Mo Baiken did not wait for the Killin Emperor to plead his case. In fact, he did not wait at all. He had pushed his hand toward the stunned Qi Mingji the moment he said the word die, forcing the Killin Emperor to cut himself off and take action immediately. Despite his fears, Qi Tianli's instinct to protect his young was ultimately greater than his reason. His aura exploded as he filled his arms with divine power and attempted to block Mo Baiken's attack. Rumble Creek, the entire Killin God realm suddenly crumpled inward like a squeezed balloon. The fabric of space looked like it might cease to exist from the sheer amount of distortion it was subjected to, and the explosive noises that followed were a mix of the destruction of the environment and the sound of Qi Tianli's bones breaking into many tiny pieces. Once again, Qi Tianli's perception of terror was renewed. He already knew that Mo Baiken was powerful beyond recognition, but it wasn't until he withstood the attack that he truly understood just how terrifying it was. Not only did he lose all sense in his arms, they were bent at a 90-degree angle that was anything but natural. He was gushing blood like a leaky meat bag with dozens of holes in it, and the pain was so great that he could not even scream out in pain. He was the Killin Emperor, and he had been defeated in an instant. Not only that, the enemy was only using one hand. This should not be possible, but there was no denying the reality happening before their eyes. "Your Majesty," the 4 Ink Killins screamed as they rushed to their emperor's rescue. They channeled their power and attacked Mo Baiken with all they got. The Killin race was powerful, but they were a defensive race by nature. They rarely went all out unless they had no other choice. Even during the war between the Western Divine Region and the Northern Divine Region, they had mostly fought in a conservative and merciful fashion. As a result, there had never been a battle where 5 rank 10 Divine Master Killins had gone all out against the enemy. Until now. The clash of power was so great that even the powerful Guardian Killins and Divine Master Killins were knocked far, far away from the point of impact. When the dust settled, Mo Baiken's palm had stalled in mid-action, and the entire Killin realm had fallen silent. For a second, it felt as if space and time itself had come to a halt. On the ground, the Killin Emperor and 4 Ink Killins looked like a picture of terror, face deathly pale and limbs still trembling uncontrollably from fear and exertion. In the sky, his hand half raised, Mo Baiken looked like an uncaring god about to pass judgment on his victims. It was a scene that could turn any fighting spirit to dust. In the distance, Qi Mingji was sitting on the ground with his eyes wide open and his mouth agape. He should probably run, but he literally could not remember how to move his limbs anymore. It was only now that he realized why his father had acted the way he did, and exactly what kind of existence he just angered with his impudence. Mo Baiken looked down in surprise. He had not expected his power to be halted by mere ants. Then, a chill entered his eyes as the corner of his lips curled into a faint sneer. "You bottom feeders honestly believed you could defy God's power with your measly powers. How pitiful and amusing. Who in God Realm know the entire history of the God Realm would dare to call a divine master a bottom feeder? This time, a strange, silver light suddenly appeared between his fingers, and he pressed his hand toward the ground once more. The formless sky was oppressive enough with Mo Baiken up there, but now it felt as if they had coalesced into 9 heavenly palaces. The 5 Killins' visions suddenly turned pitch black, and the world collapsed and discolored all around them. Boom, Qi Tianli and the 4 Ink Killins did not even know what happened. One second their senses were failing, and the next they were flying backward while spraying blood all over the place. A pitch-black vortex had manifested where they stood a moment ago. It was an incredible achievement to defeat the world's 5 strongest Killins in a single blow, and yet Mo Baiken remained completely unresponsive. He had the look of a man who had just swatted a fly out of his face. Now that there were no more obstacles, he made a grabbing motion at the stunned Qi Mingji once more. A silver palm flew straight toward the early-stage Divine Master. Mingji? Although he had just suffered a huge blow, the Killin Emperor forcefully altered his trajectory and pounced toward Mo Baiken yet again. He hadn't recovered most of his power yet, but he still put his body in the path of the silver palm. Squelch, boom, gah! The Qilin Emperor screamed as most of his right shoulder was disintegrated by the silver palm just like that. However, his brave sacrifice only diminished the silver palm's strength a little. Protect the young master! Every Qilin guardian shouted at the same time as they rushed to protect Qi Mingji. Not even overwhelming shock and horror were enough to overwhelm their near-instinctive will to protect one of their kind. 11 Qilin guardians managed to reach Qi Mingji in time and put their bodies directly in harm's way, forming a near-impenetrable bastion of flesh that even the greatest divine masters would have trouble punching through. However, the silver palm easily ripped through their bodies and dyed the world before Qi Mingji's eyes red. However, their efforts weren't in vain. The silver palm was eventually weakened and even diverted off course after passing through the Qilin Emperor and 11 guardian Qilins, striking the ground about 300 meters in front of Qi Mingji and exploding. However, there was no way an early-stage divine master could withstand even the shockwave of a power that was beyond the limits of this universe. The young prince screamed as the shockwave washed through his body and ripped dozens of holes in him with near-insulting ease. By the time he hit the ground, both his legs were shattered and his chest was an ugly, gory mess. But he was alive. Mo Baiken narrowed his eyes. He was an abyssal knight, but twice he had failed to execute a mere early-stage divine master. This was starting to piss him off. Die, he declared as he sent a ball of silvery gray dust toward the severely wounded Qi Mingji this time. It cut through space like the sharpest blade in the world, obliterating absolutely everything in its path soundlessly and ruthlessly. Ming Jie. The Qilin Emperor struggled to rise as he let out a despairing howl. Young master! The Ink Qilins and the 11 guardian Qilins in the vicinity were too injured to fly to the young prince's rescue, and every other guardian Qilin and divine master Qilin had been blown far, far away by the explosion. They would have gladly given up their lives to save his, but they just could not get there in time. They could only watch as the silvery gray dust flew toward Qi Mingji with the promise of certain death. Father! Qi Mingji closed his eyes and waited for his death, but he opened them again when a sorrowful scream that shook him to the core pierced through his ears. Somehow, someway, a divine sovereign woman had overcome the soul pressure that nearly extinguished even the divine master's fighting spirit to stand in front of him. She opened her arms wide and attempted to block with her flesh and blood a force that not even the 5 most powerful Qilins in the world could have blocked. A different kind fear 1,000,000 times greater than his fear of death filled every corner of Qi Mingji's soul. Without thinking, he screamed loud enough to rip a new hole in his chest. Jenner, don't! The Qilin woman did not move. Before the dust, her Qilin power was about as powerful as a dying ember in a sea of darkness. However, for the first time since Mo Baiken had descended upon this realm, his dead eyes suddenly shook with emotion. His hand moved as if by instinct, and the deadly dust that would have consumed Qi Mingji and the Qilin woman in another second stopped dead in its tracks and disappeared just like that. Mo Baiken slowly clenched his trembling fingers. He wasn't looking at anyone, but he wasn't attacking anymore. No one had expected this, but they'd be lying if they said they didn't appreciate this reprieve. The Qilin Emperor heaved out a long sigh of relief and nearly lost his consciousness there and then. At the back, Qi Mingji frantically grabbed the Qilin woman and carried her to the rear despite his grievous injuries. Thank you for showing mercy, venerable one, the Qilin Emperor said with a deep bow despite sporting a missing shoulder. He then looked behind himself and yelled sternly, "What are you waiting for, Mingji? Apologize to his venerable one already." Qi Mingji was scared shitless to begin with, and everything that happened afterward had crushed every bit of resistance in his bones. He hurriedly bowed his head and said, "Junior Qi Mingji apologizes for offending the venerable one with his ignorance. He thanks you for showing him mercy, and he is willing to accept any punishment for his offense." However, Mo Baiken was neither looking at the Qilin Emperor or Qi Mingji. His features were scrunched up into a deep frown as he declared with an inexplicable current of irritation, "Submit to the abyss or die." It was the same thing he had demanded a moment ago, but the difference in pressure was like night and day. Drip, 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 a blood was pooling beneath the Qilin Emperor's hand, and every drop felt as cold as ice. Bending his upper body slightly and eliminating any semblance of dignity from his voice because he did not want to trigger Mo Baiken again, Qi Tianli asked, "If I may be so bold, when you refer to the abyss, do you mean the Abyss of Nothingness?" "That is correct," Mo Baiken replied emotionlessly. The Qilin Emperor's breathing sped up abruptly. It took him a couple of breaths before he managed to regain control of himself. The rest of the Killins were just as shocked as he was. "I mean no offense, but how do you compare to the Abyssal Monarch and Pope, Venerated One?" He asked another question in the most respectful tone he could muster. "Fool!" Mobiken narrowed his eyes immediately. "I am eternally grateful that I was born to serve beneath the foot of the Abyssal Monarch, and you think the likes of me could ever be compared to him. If not for your stupidity and ignorance, I would have sentenced you to 1,000,000 deaths for this blasphemy." The Killin Emperor was so shocked that he blurted out, "Could he be a true god?" "Ha!" Mobiken snorted disdainfully. A look of absolute faith crept onto his features as he declared, "I will only say this one time, so listen well. All gods of the Abyss are His Majesty's servants. He is the god of all gods." The Killin Emperor gulped audibly. Everyone else was so shocked that their very blood had become frozen in their veins. This man was a monster, and yet he believed wholeheartedly that it was his honor to serve beneath the foot of this abyssal monarch. Moreover, he was filled with undying faith every time he said the word abyssal monarch or His Majesty. Just how powerful was this abyssal monarch? Speaking of which, this Mobiken had also mentioned that he served the Pope. Were they a god of gods as well? This was a level of power that literally exceeded the realms of their imagination. Mobiken looked down on them, and his expression returned to gloomy contempt once more. "Do you understand now?" The Killin Emperor subconsciously lowered his posture a little further. He asked one last question in a trembling voice. "This old one must know, but if we the Killin race swear to serve His Majesty as his loyal subjects, will he grant us peace when he graces the god realm with his presence?" Loyal subjects. Mobiken looked like he just heard the greatest joke in the world. "You think you lot deserve to serve His Majesty as his loyal subjects? No, you are worthy to become his servants or slaves at best." There was nothing the Killin Emperor could say to that. "I could slaughter you all like livestock. In fact, I should have annihilated your whole race for your earlier offenses," Mobiken uttered with a kind of seriousness that chilled them to the very bone. "Do you know why you are still alive? It's because he is a compassionate soul who loathes indiscriminate killing and bullying above all else. No matter how lowly you lot are, he is the only one who has the right to decide your fate. The Abyssal Monarch will grace this universe with his presence in just a few years. It is my wish to give him a clean world in which all living beings will surrender to him from the depths of their souls, not a lifeless place of blood and death. So, will you be the guides who will light the way to a new era, or will you be the fools whom we must eliminate to pave the way for His Majesty's arrival?" The Killin Emperor was already kneeling on his knees before Mobiken had even finished his sentence. His head was a hair away from touching the ground as well. This Mobiken was powerful beyond measure, and he was anything but a merciful man. However, he had avoided abusing his powers and showed them mercy because of his Emperor's decree. He could be playing the long game, but Qi Tianli honestly could not think why he would bother when he could just get what he wanted by force, like right now. Also, if what he said about the Abyssal Monarch was accurate, then the God of Gods was not only not dictatorial, but they were benevolent to the point where they didn't seem fit to rule. The most important thing to note, though, was that this Abyssal Monarch would be entering the God realm in a matter of years. It more or less set his decision in stone. "Thank you for your guidance, Venerable One. The Killin race will do our best to assist you in reshaping the God realm and convincing everyone into accepting the Abyssal Monarch's rule." The Killin Emperor knew what Mobiken wanted. The fastest way to take control of the entire God realm before the Abyssal Monarch arrived was to use a local power as the mouthpiece. And unfortunately for him, he was the perfect person for such a job. First, the Dragon Monarch, then Emperor Yun, and now the Abyss. He did not think he would live long enough to go through so many masters. Fate must think he was an interesting toy to play with him, so he did not have a choice, though. He had felt Mobiken's power with his own body. It was an overwhelming power that no one in the universe could possibly go up against. He was but a pawn in the grand scheme of things. "I hope you won't blame me for this, Your Majesty. There is nothing you've shown me that could go up against such power." He could already see Yun Qi's tragic fate. The young man's era had just begun, and it was on the verge of setting already. "You are both lucky and flexible. They are good qualities to have, be it in the Abyss or the God realm," Mobiken praised Qi Tianli. "If we bring this lowly universe to submission with the least amount of blood and murder, I am certain that His Majesty would be pleased with it. Naturally, you will be rewarded with the peace you desire. Thank you again for granting us the opportunity to serve the Abyssal Monarch, Venerable One," the Killin Emperor said. The tremors in his heart had not stopped for a second, however. If resistance was futile, then the next best thing he could do was to save as many lives as possible. The Kilin race aside, the first race that came to mind was the Blue Dragon race. Unfortunately, his half-a-daughter, the Blue Dragon Emperor, was not nearly as flexible as he was. She was as indifferent as she was rigid. He was already looking for opportunities to request a meeting with the Blue Dragon Emperor. "Very good," Mobiken replied in a cold voice. "Now update me on the current state of the world. I will know who that so-called Emperor Yun is as well." "Yes, yes." The Kilin Emperor was still bleeding like crazy and in pain, but he forced himself to ignore it and begin. "Emperor Yun's full name is Yun Qi, and he is the highest emperor who rules all of the primal chaos. He is also the first true emperor to have brought all 4 divine regions of the God realm under his control." Mobiken's appearance in the Kilin realm had been relatively calm, but the same could not be said for the eastern divine region. Nanjiaming, Nanjiaguang, and the 4 pages were currently flying toward the east. Their terrifying auras swept across countless star regions and terrified all those who felt them. Their destination was the Snow Song Realm. The reason they chose the Snow Song Realm as their first destination was because it was where the strongest presence of the divine region resided. Nanjiaming took in deep gulps of energy while commenting. "I once overheard the Pope saying that our lifespan should increase by several times, even tens of times if we are able to make it to the God realm, but I could not believe it was true until now. This world should have belonged to us." Nanjiaguang growled hatefully as he scanned left and right. "These lowly beings dare lead a luxurious life we dare not even dream of when the rest of us can only struggle in abyssal dust. They all deserve to die. Do not forget Sir Knight's advice. We can kill, but we must not kill indiscriminately," Nanjiaming reminded him. "Our cultivation is not up to par yet, but there's still a chance we'll be anointed as abyssal knights because we are the pioneers. There is no need to stain our hands and diminish our glory with the blood of these commoners." "HMPH?" Nanjiaguang responded with a grunt. "Don't worry, the obedient will live and the defiant will die." Nanjiaming sneered. "And there will be plenty of defiant fools for the first 2 years at least. After all, the one thing the world doesn't lack is fools." Suddenly, Nanjiaming and Nanjiaguang fell silent and looked forward at the same time. Ding! There was a blue flash in the starry space, and the surrounding temperature plummeted instantly. At the same time, a fairy-like woman covered in icy mist appeared out of seemingly nowhere. Her white clothes were purer than snow, and her icy hair looked like something that should only exist in a dream. Half of her face was covered up by the mist, leaving behind only a pair of eyes that seemed cold enough to pierce the soul. "Who are you people?" she uttered in a frigid, ruthless voice. Nanjiaming and Nanjiaguang frowned slightly before snorting at the same time. "A woman? That's surprising. This is perfect. If only the rest of the lowlifes would deliver themselves to our doorstep as well," Nanjiaming said while scanning the woman in front of her. She was without a doubt the strongest profound practitioner of this divine region, Snow Song God Emperor Xuanyin. Nanjiaming said unhurriedly, "We are soon-to-be abyssal knights who hail from the abyss and serve the abyssal monarch and the Pope. By the order of the abyssal monarch, we have come over in advance to take over this world. Those who submit will live, and those who rebel will die." His voice gradually sank. "So what is your choice? Do you choose to live or do you choose to die?" Xuanyin was powerful enough to sense their deadly strength as a matter of course. The 6 men were obviously carrying varying degrees of injuries on their person, but their auras were only second to the heaven-smiting devil emperor who returned from the crimson crack in the wall of primal chaos back then. The abyss, Xuanyin frowned deeply to herself. Nanjiaguang raised a hand and said, "She's probably the emperor of this divine region, so she does not fall under the category of people we should not kill indiscriminately. Long story short, save your breath and kill her already. If nothing else, it will be much easier for us to take over this divine region." Nanjiaming did not disagree. Clearly, their way of doing things was very different from that of Mobiken. "Before that, though," Nanjiaguang's expression turned mocking, "I am interested to know how far the greatest experts of this world can struggle." "I personally think you'll be disappointed, but sure," Nanjiaguang said with a smirk. "Go teach her a lesson, Yin Feng. She's an empress, so don't say I don't take care of my subordinates' welfare, ha ha ha." Nanjiaguang also echoed his laughter. They were the absolute kings of this world before the abyssal monarch arrived, so how could they not have some fun first? "Yes, sir." Behind the cackling Nanjiaguang and Nanjiaming, One of the 4 pages responded affirmatively before stepping out of the ranks. His companions clearly looked disappointed. Yin Feng was perfectly respectful in front of Mo Baiken and compliant in front of Nan Zheaming and Nan Zheaguang. But Xuanyin, it was as if an invisible force had pulled his features into a wild and lascivious expression. Slowly curling his index finger at the woman, he said, "A level 10 divine master, tusk. I don't want my companions to call me a woman beater, so I'll allow you 5 moves before I make my own. Of course, you may also choose to prostrate yourself before us and beg for mercy. Who knows, maybe one of our squires will cave to their natural desire to protect the fairer sex and take you in as their slave. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha." The pages behind him roared with laughter as well. Ice covered Xuanyin's palm soundlessly. She would not believe that someone would dare to disrespect her so if she wasn't looking at them right now. She did not recognize the 6 men's faces or auras. The 2 leaders especially emanated an invisible pressure that was even greater than Long Bai's. This Yin Feng was a level 10 divine master just like her, but his aura felt incredibly strange and unfamiliar. She could have sworn that it was a power that had never existed in this universe, until now. This was no time for idle thoughts, however. Without a word, she unleashed the icy power she had gathered in her palm straight toward Yin Feng. The beam of ice was so radiant that Yin Feng felt as if it had pierced right through his pupils and into his soul. His scornful expression did not change, though. He reached out toward the icy beam as if he would crush it with his bare hands. Although they were both level 10 divine masters, it was clear Yin Feng thought himself superior to Xuanyin because she was a denizen of primal chaos, and he the abyss. Ding! The icy beam suddenly flashed right before it would hit Yin Feng, and a string of freezing explosions ripped across space. The surrounding area instantly transformed into a seemingly borderless, frozen prison. Yin Feng did not move a muscle, though. Lips curling into a disdainful sneer, he waved his arm and easily tore the veil of ice to shreds. He wanted to taunt her, saying something like, "Is this the best the strongest expert of this divine region had to offer?" But he didn't even manage to open his mouth fully before his expression dropped all of a sudden. It was because a new surge of ice, profound energy, exploded right in front of his face and filled the space with ice once more. It was a 2-layered attack. Eyes narrowing a little, Yin Feng let out a low cry and shredded the second prison of ice into pieces as well. However, a 3rd surge of ice divine power enveloped him at a speed he thought was impossible for a level 10 divine master until he saw it with his own eyes. Xuanyin didn't stop there either. She proceeded to launch her 4th, 5th, 10th, 30th, 50th ice prison at her enemy, and each one as powerful as the last. Xuanyin wasn't fully compatible with the Ice Phoenix divine soul during the battle against the Western divine region, but a few years had passed since then. Today, both her compatibility and her mastery of the divine power of the Ice Phoenix had improved vastly thanks to her dual cultivation with Yun Qi. Who would have thought that a single ice beam could create an icy calamity that spanned over 10,000 kilometers? Meanwhile, Yin Feng had gone from supremely confident to suitably wary to absolutely flustered near the end of Xuanyin's assault. His arrogance had cost him dearly. Had he employed all of his strength from the get-go, Xuanyin would not have been able to push him so effortlessly. As it was, he never got the chance to muster his full strength after he missed the initial window of opportunity. Cold energy ate through his profound energy, his flesh, his bones, and even his soul. Most of his power was frozen before he even got the chance to use it. By the time Xuanyin finally reached the end of her assault, he had lost nearly all sensation in his limbs, and his torso felt almost as stiff as a block of ice. Bang, there was one final burst of cold ice before the most brilliant blue of them all pierced straight toward Yin Feng. It looked like a lone star amidst a sea of darkness. Kai, the Snow Princess sword stabbed right through Yin Feng's frozen chest and out of his back. Ha 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 ha! One would think that Nan Zheaming would be furious or panicked on behalf of his subordinate, but the man merely let out an uproarious laugh before saying, "See, I knew we would get a pleasant surprise eventually." This woman, Nan Zheaguang stared at Xuanyin curiously. "I knew she was a god-bearer, but there is more god in her than I thought. I suppose it's worth keeping her around after all." "That's true," Nan Zheaming expressed his agreement. Back to Yin Feng, the man's complexion had turned a shade of pig liver from abject shock and fury. Glaring daggers at Xuanyin, he finally managed to detonate his long frozen powers. Boom! The layers of ice freezing the man shattered uncontrollably, and countless cracks spread across the vast space. Nearly half of his body and his profound energy had been frozen by the Ice Phoenix's divine power. But Yin Feng's counterattack was still unbelievably scary. Xuanyin abruptly threw herself backward and withdrew her sword even as the explosion pushed her far, far away from ground zero. Yin Feng himself was thrown back like a rag doll. By the time he finally caught himself and expelled the freezing energy inside his body, blood gushed out of his wounds for 3 whole breaths before it finally stopped. Xuanyin did not try to press her advantage despite the opening. She unconsciously tightened her grip around her sword. She had taken her enemy completely by surprise and was able to pressure him to a humiliating extent. However, the meager counterattack he had mustered with his unfrozen power was still far more powerful than she dared to imagine. This outcome also opened her eyes to a terrifying truth. If this Yin Feng hadn't underestimated her from the beginning, her chances of beating him in a head-on fight were probably less than 50%. In terms of overall strength, Xuanyin was second only to Yun Qi with Hell Monarch turned on. Not even the Devil Queen or the 3 Yama ancestors were strong enough to be called her equal. In terms of cultivation alone, she was the undisputed #1 in primal chaos. However, her opponent was cough, 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 cough. Yin Feng let out at least a dozen lung-bursting coughs before he finally managed to get his reaction under control. A shocking amount of blood floated around his person. Xuanyin's strength far exceeded his expectations, and to say that he was shocked would be an understatement. However, it was nothing compared to the anger and humiliation he was feeling. He was a pioneer of the Abyss, and there shouldn't be a single being in this universe that could stand as his equal, much less look up to. However, he had been humiliated and soundly beaten in his very first battle. What would his people say if they heard about this? He would become an overnight laughing stock. "I was careless," Yin Feng uttered as he struggled to right himself. It was impossible to tell if he was shaking from the leftover cold or the sheer humiliation. "Again, this time I'll tear you apart," suddenly Nanjiaming said. "Stand down, page." Caught off guard, Yin Feng looked back with a fearful expression. Sir Squire, it was just a moment of carelessness, I swear. Please give me a second chance. I swear that this time I'll—" "Relax. No one is going to reveal your shame," Nanjiaming consoled his subordinate while shaking his wrists carelessly. "I'm telling you to stand down only because this woman's power is rather special, and I think there's a chance the Pope may be interested in her. I would like to capture her alive or keep her body intact is all. I am certain you can beat her if you go all out, but are you sure you can do it without damaging her corpse?" "No." Yin Feng let out a long sigh of relief before bowing his head. "Of course, Sir Squire. Thank you. Who are you people?" Xuanyin uttered in a bone-chilling voice that would have turned the blood of anyone from primal chaos to ice. But these people were not from primal chaos at all. "And where is this abyss you speak of? Could it be the Abyss of Nothingness?" "He." In response, Nanjiaming merely let out a chuckle before saying, "My apologies, but weaklings do not have the right to question their superiors." "Now, kneel," he attacked at the same time he gave the order. A shocking blast of power immediately surged toward Xuanyin. Before the energy reached her, before it even exited his hands for the matter, Xuanyin abruptly felt a crushing pressure on her chest. The next thing she knew, it felt as if the very universe was threatening to grind her into dust. That Yin Feng was already powerful beyond belief, but this man was easily several times his better. Xuanyin forced herself to take a step forward despite the tidal wave of power crashing toward her. However, she immediately realized after taking that step that there was zero chance she could ever defeat the man. Without hesitation, she took a defensive stance and surrounded herself in an infinite amount of slow-moving ice crystals. It was a new move she invented last year called Ice Razor Stars. It was a purely defensive move that maximized a profound practitioner's defenses, and she had been planning to pass it down to those with the Ice Phoenix's bloodline and improve their self-preservation capabilities. She never thought there would come a day where she, a profound practitioner who was all but unbeatable in primal chaos, would have to execute this skill to the max to save her own life. It was as if a hole had been gouged into the star region itself as Nanjiaming's power enveloped Xuanyin. In just an instant, Ice Razor Stars shattered into a billion pieces. An instant later, even the fragments of icy energy had winked into nothingness. Realizing that ice razor stars alone wasn't enough, Xuanyin stabbed out with the Snow Princess sword in a last-ditch effort to save herself. The shrill cry of metal entered her ears as the blade abruptly bent almost to the point of snapping. Blood drained from her face as she executed moon-splitting cascade and put 50 kilometers between herself and her opponent immediately. It was only then she finally managed to escape Nan Xiaoming's power. Crack! An unnatural noise rang from her sword, and Xuanyin looked down to find 3 cracks spreading across the blade that had accompanied for over 10,000 years. It stopped only when her gaze made contact with the blade. A stream of blood flowed down her palm and drenched the sword in no time. The contrast between the bright red blood and her snow-white figure and sword painted a most bleak and poignant picture. Meanwhile, Nan Xiaoming was frowning a little. He wasn't surprised when Yin Feng was taken by surprise because he thought it was a product of the page's own arrogance and disdain for the enemy. However, he wasn't expecting the woman to be strong enough to escape his power at all. What an incredible movement skill! I've never seen anything like it on a divine master even in the Abyss. Nan Xiaoguang's gaze grew a little more interested. It looks like this world isn't completely worthless after all. HMPH, so what? Nan Xiaoming let out a cold HMPH as his eyes flashed black. This time he stretched out both hands and summoned 2 black palms above Xuanyin's hands. They were kilometers wide in just the blink of an eye. It was clearly made out of dark, profound energy. It was clear that Xuanyin's resistance had angered Nan Xiaoming. The dark pressure enveloping her entire body was far, far greater than it was before. Xuanyin was most familiar with dark, profound energy as a matter of course. Although Nan Xiaoming's dark, profound energy wasn't nearly as pure as Yun Qi's, there was more than enough power in it to extinguish her last vestiges of hope. She whispered a word in her mind before her ice-blue hair abruptly floated in the space. Each strand was shining with a pure, crystalline light. At the same time, the image of the ice phoenix manifested behind her and let out a long, shrill cry that shook the entire eastern divine region. She knew Yun Qi would hear the cry and the soul voice contained within it for sure. Don't come, Yun Qi. The phoenix cry was still ongoing when Xuanyin became one with the image of the ice phoenix, and the Snow Princess sword became charged with incredible energy. Grim and determined, she stabbed toward the inescapable shadow with Broken Moon Oblivion. Hideous darkness clashed against dazzling ice. Shrill explosions deafened the ears as an icy blue haze filled the space before bursting like a star in the dark night. The light overwhelmed the darkness and spread across countless nearby stars and star realms. This was her second warning to Yun Qi to stay away. The sheer brightness of the chilly light stabbed into Nan Xiaoguang's eyes and caused his pupils to contract involuntarily. At the same time, his outstretched hand abruptly shuddered as Xuanyin's counterattack blew a bloody hole right at the center of his palm. Dark blood scattered all over the place. "Hiss! This woman!" Nan Xiaoming uttered through clenched teeth. Xuanyin had poured all of her Ice Phoenix divine power into the ultimate attack, and the result was as stunning as it was beautiful. Unfortunately, the chasm of power between herself and Nan Xiaoming was just too great. The burning ice only lasted a couple of breaths before it declined rapidly, and soon it began breaking down layer by layer under Nan Xiaoming's dark energy. Nan Xiaoming was shocked, but he quickly recovered his composure and sealed the wound in his palm with dark energy. At the same time, his gaze grew a bit darker. He wasn't expecting the woman to give him a second pleasant surprise, but her resistance only strengthened his desire to capture her. Darkness quickly refilled the void as the icy light declined at an exponential rate. Eventually, even the light surrounding Xuanyin had begun dimming in earnest. When Nan Xiaoming abruptly turned over his blood-drenched palm, she shook like she had been dealt a heavy blow. The Snow Princess sword's light winked out like it never existed. At the same time, the darkness covered up nearly half of her body in an instant. "You put up an interesting struggle," Nan Xiaoming praised. Unfortunately, it was at this moment a sharp, whistling sound erupted from the distance. A pair of immense, profound energies struck the darkness at the same time and brought the advancement of the darkness to a dead halt. At the same time, a golden beam pierced through the distant void like lightning and wrapped around Xuanyin's waist. It didn't harm her, though. In fact, the second the mysterious energy made contact with Xuanyin, it immediately transformed into dark, profound energy and exploded, ripping out of the confines of Nan Xiaoming's dark energy, and not a moment too soon. A pitch-black whirlpool that looked like the entrance to an infinite abyss swirled where she was just a second ago. Xuanyin was pulled back at least 50 kilometers before she came to a stop next to another woman. The dark, profound energy covering the mysterious object faded away to reveal divine oracle. After it let go of Xuanyin, it wrapped around its master's smooth arm instead of returning to her waist. The golden aura surrounding Xuanyin's savior was as cold as a venomous snake, ready to consume its prey at a moment's notice. She was none other than Xianxia, of course. Yun Qi had told her not to act without his permission no matter what. Clearly, she hadn't taken his warning to heart. Behind her, Xianai Wugu and Xianai Bingzhu floated with a stern expression on their faces. "Who are they?" Xianxia asked in a chilly voice. "Didn't you hear my warning?" Xuanyin responded while breathing heavily. Blood was dripping down from her lips despite her best efforts to suppress her injuries. "You shouldn't have come. Is this the first day you know me? HMPH. Xianxia humphed imperiously before asking again, "Who are they?" "They're outsiders, people who do not belong to this world," Xuanyin replied in a bone-chilling voice. She had given the world 2 priceless warnings with the Phoenix Cry and her ultimate attack, but it came at a heavy cost. She highly doubted that she and the Xianais would be able to escape. Her response stunned Xianai Wugu and Xianai Bingzhu, but they came to terms with it just as quickly. It was the only answer considering what they had witnessed just now. "Hehe," Nanjiaguang shot Nanjiaming's wounded right hand a glance while chuckling. "The 4 greatest experts of this divine region have all gathered in one place. This is perfect." Xianxia was already shaken when she sensed the turbulence earlier, but it wasn't until her enemies were within sight that she realized just how bad the situation was. She was going to say something when Xuanyin's whisper entered her ears. "Get ready to escape with all you have. It's the only option. The Snow Song God Emperor is correct." The 2 Brahma ancestors moved to the front as Xianai Wugu spoke. Despite the dire situation, the old man's voice remained as calm as ever. "This outside threat feels as fallacious as a dream, and yet it is undeniably the reality we live in. God Emperor, for the sake of the Brahma, no, the Xianai lineage, you must protect yourself no matter what." Before either woman could voice a response, a mammoth force had already pushed them far, far away. At the same time, the 2 ancient figures launched forward like an eagle and summoned a mighty, invisible wall with all their strength. When the 2 Brahma ancestors got close to the opposition and sensed their power, they immediately realized what an enormous error it had been on their part when they had chosen not to ground Xianxia by force. They weren't senile enough to think that the outsiders would allow their prey to slip from their grasp. So they prayed that their full strength was enough to stop them for even a moment and buy Xianxia a sliver of hope. Outsiders, people not of primal chaos. Before this, they firmly believed that the remnants of the Brahma monarch had earned eternal peace under Yun Qi's absolute rule, and that they would return to their former glory in 10,000 years. To think that a new, impossible threat would emerge in less than a few years. Ha 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 ha! Nanjiaming saw through their intent instantly and laughed like a madman. "You think you can escape? I won't say it's the wrong choice, but do you really think you can escape us?" As the laughing squire extended his left arm toward the 2 Brahma ancestors, they gathered all of their Brahma monarch divine power until their hair was dancing like crazy, and their eyes shone like a pair of tiny suns. Finally, they unleashed everything they had at Nanjiaming. It was at this moment something unexpected happened. Nanjiaming was in mid-attack when his body suddenly froze as if someone had cast a spell on him. At the same time, his disdainful eyes suddenly contracted into needles before dilating like saucers in an instant. Someone who didn't know better might have thought that his eyes were pricked by golden needles. Even better, his reaction was followed by absolute terror. Terror that seemed extreme enough to tear his very soul into shreds. He had never displayed this much fear even when he was facing off against the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning or the Sword Sovereign duo. Nanjiaming wasn't the only one who was reacting oddly either. Nanjiaguang and the 4 pages also looked absolutely terrified for some reason. 2 of the pages even lost control of their lower bodies and dropped to their knees. Rumble, the attack should have been of no threat to Nanjiaming whatsoever. He should have been able to extinguish it with one hand. However, not only did the pair of golden beams land squarely on his chest, the protective aura that naturally protected a profound practitioner's body had disappeared without a trace. As a result, Nanjiaming was blown back unceremoniously while blood sprayed out of his lips like a fountain. Obviously, the two Brahma ancestors weren't expecting this at all. Even Xuanyin and Xianxia paused visibly in mid-flight. Before the attack could do more damage, though, a palm stretched seemingly out of thin air and caught Nan Zheaming's back. It also expelled the foreign energy ripping through his body in an instant. "Calm down, it's just a coincidence," Nan Zheaming said while withdrawing his arm. His complexion looked pale, and there was still some lingering terror in his eyes. However, the man was able to gather his wits and continue in a calm voice. "They're probably the god-bearers of the Brahma Heaven God clan. The outsiders mentioned this before, remember. That is why their powers are." Nan Zheaming could have, and would have if he had a few more seconds, figured this out on his own. He quickly regained his rationality after he overcame his initial emotion. Nan Zheaming let out a small sigh of relief before saying in a dark tone, "I know, HMPH, these old bastards dare embarrass me, I'm gonna." "Wait." A black fog surrounded Nan Zheaming's arm, but Nan Zheaming caught it before he could vent his anger. "You cannot. I know it's a small chance, but if they are related to them, then disposing of them without permission will be." Nan Zheaming frowned instinctively before his companion's words caught up to his mind. His forehead immediately became soaked with cold sweat, and the killing intent he had mustered against the two Brahma ancestors abruptly vanished without a trace. "Fine, we'll cripple those two women first." Nan Zheaming was desperate to vent the anger he had accumulated up until this point, so he let out a growl and abruptly vanished without a trace. The shadow that zipped past Qianai Wugu and Qianai Bingzhu was faster than anything they had ever seen, faster than they even thought was possible. The two Brahma ancestors were some of the strongest experts in primal chaos, but even they only managed to catch a glimpse of it before it was too late. Shred, Nan Zheaming sped toward Xianxia and Xuanyin like a black scar that ripped through everything. What should have been a near impossible gap to close was closing at a depressingly fast rate. The pressure behind them kept growing and growing. When it became so overbearing they were unable to even draw a single breath anymore, Xuanyin abruptly hit Xianxia in the back before launching herself toward Nan Zheaming. Xianxia only managed to let out a single cry before Xuanyin's ice energy propelled her away from Nan Zheaming. Xuanyin flew toward Black Scar like a dying ice-blue comet. Ding! The cold light crumbled like 1,000 shattering stars before the irresistible weight. However, she ultimately managed to stop Nan Zheaming for a breath, and only a breath. When the moment had passed, the dying light was completely consumed by the black fog. A frustrated growl vibrated under Nan Zheaming's throat as the crying snow princess sword slipped out of its master's blood-drenched fingers, and Xuanyin herself was sent flying into the distance like a lifeless butterfly. Streaks of blood dyed her usually unblemished clothes red. There were numerous individuals by Yun Qi's side who absolutely detested Qianxia, and some would give anything to rip her to pieces. There were two people who felt only gratitude toward her, however. One of them was Kai Weiao and the other Xuanyin. Their reason was almost identical as well. In this situation, they might be the only two people who would willingly give up their lives to save her. If Qianxia was thinking rationally, or if she was still the cold, heartless woman she used to be, she would have seized the lifeline Xuanyin had exchanged with her life and sped away without ever looking back. However, her blood ultimately wasn't as cold as it used to be. While resisting the combined power of the two Brahma ancestors and Xuanyin with all her might, she whipped out the divine oracle and flung it straight at Xuanyin. It was a near thing, but the divine oracle just barely managed to wrap around Xuanyin's waist before it hit its maximum range, before pulling the woman back toward her side. "Ai?" Qianai Wugu and Qianai Bingzhu let out a heavy, but not unhappy sigh at the same time. Although they had secluded themselves from the world for a long time, they had watched Qianxia grow up since she was a child. She really had changed completely in the past couple of years. "Fool," Nan Zheaming snorted while removing the ice invading his body with a quick shake of his hand. "What a beautiful relationship you have there. It would be unknightly behavior if I split you two up, wouldn't it?" He abruptly turned around and let out another growl. Black fog gushed out of his body as the already dark environment darkened a little more. The dark void of space shattered as if crushed by a massive, invisible hand as dark beams surged toward Xuanyin. When Qianxia canceled out the energies pushing her toward the distance, she forced herself to come to a stop, swung the divine oracle again, and pulled herself toward Xuanyin. She got in front of the bloodied woman right before the dark energies would devour her before unleashing the dark divine power of the Devil Emperor's blood in haste. Divine Oracle ripped across the sky and tore the attack in half, but it wasn't enough to cancel out the curtain of energy completely. Xianxia grunted as the remnant energy struck her, but she forcefully steadied herself before taking off with grievously wounded Xuanyin in her arms. Now was the time to entrap both women and extinguish their hope once and for all, but the invincible power that had easily overwhelmed the Du did not move for some reason. Nan Jiaming's hand was frozen in midair. Nan Jiaguang was watching from the back because it was beyond shameful to gang up on two mortal women with his companions, but his expression was now filled with astonishment. The 4 pages were as stiff as statues as well. Xianxia was bleeding from all of her orifices, and most of her protective aura had been destroyed by the attack. More importantly, the light shroud she normally used to mask her features had come completely undone. This meant that her true countenance was completely exposed to the 6 men. Her complexion was as pale as a sheet, and her face was a bloody, still bleeding mess. Even so, she was still the Brahma monarch goddess, the unparalleled beauty who was beautiful enough to make any man or woman fall in love with her at first sight. Nan Jiaming and Nan Jiaguang might be stronger than the strongest experts in this entire universe, but strength did not equal immunity to beauty. Is it even possible for such a woman to exist in this world? A page muttered unconsciously. Gulp, another page gulped audibly before saying, "She's practically as beautiful as Lady Kaylee." The title, Lady Kaylee, snapped Nan Jiaguang out of his reverie and caused his eyebrows to scrunch together. The next second he scolded the man angrily. "What did you just say? Lady Kaylee is beautiful beyond measure, and it is rumored that she will become a god in the future. How dare you compare her to a mere mortal?" The yell immediately snapped all 4 pages from their daze and caused the rightmost man to drop to his knees. He pleaded with abject terror, "I'm sorry. It was just a slip of the tongue, Sir Squire. I would never compare her to Lady Kaylee even if I am 1,000 times more foolish and brave than I actually am." "I'm well aware it's a slip of the tongue," Nan Jiaguang humphed coldly. "Still, do I need to remind you how severe a punishment you will receive if your transgression somehow spreads to our people? You are a page and a glorious pioneer. You won't be able to become an abyssal knight if you cannot control yourself." The page bowed his head deeply before responding. "Thank you for your guidance, Sir Squire. This one swears to reflect on his conduct for 1,000 days. It was at this moment that Nan Jiaguang spoke up. "It's fine, brother. It can't be helped. In terms of appearance alone, this woman is like a priceless treasure hidden amidst a sea of trash. I can hardly believe a world like this could give birth to someone like her. It would be a great shame to kill her." "I know. She must be captured alive no matter the cost," Nan Jiaguang replied while looking Xianxia up and down repeatedly. "I must warn you, though, no matter how tempted you are, you absolutely mustn't lay a finger on her, understand?" "Of course," Nan Jiaming replied. "She may be a mere mortal, but she is beautiful enough to be the best of tributes. This means that no one, not even Sir Knight, has the right to lay a finger on her. We will give her to the Pope as a tribute. I am certain it will be a great addition to our string of achievements." After saying that, Nan Jiaming forced down his greed and averted his eyes from Xianxia's face. Mustering his dark powers once more, the man summoned a dark vortex that swelled to an impossible size in just an instant. It trapped Xianxia and Xuanyin right at the center all too quickly. The only silver lining was that the dark energy was missing its previous killing intent and brutality. But considering the fate they had intended for Xianxia, it was hardly any consolation at all. "Heh," Xianxia sneered as her gorgeous eyes shone with a vicious glint. "You filthy dogs think you deserve me?" Her eyes turned as black as the abyss right after she said this. It was an inescapable situation. She had no other choice. She got ready to ignite her Devil Emperor's blood completely and fight these curs to the bitter end. Suddenly, the Devil Emperor's blood ceased its activity without warning. At the same time, Xianxia and Xuanyin vanished from the dark vortex all of a sudden. All Nan Jiaming and Nan Jiaguang saw was a crimson flash before they were gone. A puzzled and confused Nan Jiaming slowly turned his head to face a nearby star region. Xianxia and Xuanyin had reappeared in that direction, but they were now accompanied by 7 different auras. He was surprised because he never sensed them coming. One second they weren't there, and the next they were. They were Yun Qi, the Devil Queen, Keija, Shui Meiyan, and the 7 Yama ancestors. Junzile would have come, but she was way too emotional for battle right now. Yun Qi had forcefully left her behind at Emperor Yun City. Nan Zheaming's surprise lasted only for a fraction of a second, however. He cackled. How convenient. Who would have thought that this world's greatest experts would deliver themselves right into our hands? I guess foolishness and ignorance weren't completely negative traits after all. Ha 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 ha. His laughter was shrill and unpleasant, and the pressure behind it was enough to squeeze a lesser expert's heart into a crumpled heap. Yun Qi, you... Xuanyin's vision had grown a little blurry, but she wasn't so weak that she couldn't even sense Yun Qi's aura. Terror seized her heart and soul for an instant before she sensed that Shui Meiyin was nearby. She relaxed, but only a little. Yun Qi turned toward Xuanyin and Xianxia Yinger. Blood-red color stabbed into his eyeballs like hot knives. He looked away. He did not comfort Xuanyin or criticize Xianxia Yinger. There was only cold, deathly silence. Shui Meiyin's grip around Yun Qi's arm abruptly tightened, and the world piercer in her left hand blinked repeatedly as if she was tempted to use it right there and then. Yun Qi rarely wore his emotions on his sleeve these days, but the tiny disturbance in his aura was all everyone needed to tell that he was furious beyond imagination. At the back, the three Yama ancestors held their breath for fear that the mere act of drawing breath would draw their master's wrath. By now, Qianai Wugu and Qianai Bingzhu had made it to Yun Qi's side. Shui Meiyin's appearance had improved their mood considerably, to say the least. "There is no need to stay here overly long, Your Majesty. Let us retreat immediately," Qianai Wugu said. "This is not a matter of imperial honor. They hail from the beyond, and their powers are beyond our recognition or ability to resist right now. Retreat is the only viable option." "What are you waiting for? Go!" Xuanyin ordered in a tone that wouldn't accept no as an answer after pushing Qianxia Yinger away. Yun Qi neither looked back at her nor said anything. He gently removed Shui Meiyin's hand from his arm before walking toward the outsiders. "Yun Qi!" Xuanyin cried out in panic, but someone caught her arm before she could do anything. Kai Waiao said quietly, "Calm down. Meiyin is with us. We are safe even if we assume the worst-case scenario. Do not blame him for acting overly rash. It is you whom they hurt after all. Plus, our strongest foe is in the western divine region right now." It could mean nothing, but her voice abruptly dropped an octave lower. "It could also mean a golden opportunity." Xuanyin. Meanwhile, Nan Zheaming and the others were all looking at Yun Qi. Xuanyin, the Devil Queen, the three Yama ancestors, the Qianais. They were all obviously experts who stood at the pinnacle of this universe. So to say that the insignificant little divine sovereign felt out of place would be an understatement. That wasn't even the strangest thing, however. For whatever reason, it seemed that regarded this divine sovereign as their superior. "You're looking for the king of this world, right?" Yun Qi started while still walking toward the outsiders. "Here I am." "Oh." Nan Zheaming and Nan Zheaguang scanned him for an instant before snorting at the exact same time. Interesting. It didn't really matter to them if the king of this world was a divine master or a divine sovereign, to be honest. Both were ants they could squash any time they wanted to. "How kind of you to show yourself before us. Are you here to meekly claim your death?" Nan Zheaming taunted with a half-smirk on his face. He looked like he was staring at a pitiful reptile on the ground, not a person. Yun Qi did not respond to Nan Zheaming's words. His icy cold eyes hid a mad killing intent that hadn't shown itself for a very, very long time. Tone and appearance remaining exactly the same as before, he said, "As the pioneers of the Abyss, I am sure you have enjoyed a great deal of freedom and pleasure during your short stay. Am I right?" Darkness glowed from the center of his palm as he raised his arm. "In that case, it is time to die. T/N. I'd like to imagine Yun Qi speaking like Bruce Lee making his weird cries when he fights."